Everyone, I'd like to welcome everyone to an unusually cosy meeting of the Audit Committee. And before we start, just to make sure that people are aware that we normally meet in the council chamber. The reason that we're not is because of some long desired improvement works in the chamber that we all look forward to. And I'm very grateful that this room has been made available, because members may be aware that the initial proposal is that we would have the bare room, which is even smaller, and would not have been appropriate for a public forum. So I'm glad that we've got this room, and I'm also particularly pleased that there is not a meeting immediately following, because until a couple of weeks ago we expected there would be a meeting at 5 o'clock, which would have meant made it a bit difficult for us or for them. So thank you for that. And I should say to anyone who isn't familiar, this is the Audit Committee, Councillor Rob Logan, Chair of this committee, and the most important thing to say is if I'm not aware of a fire drill planned. So if there is a fire alarm, exit by the nearest centre, which may well be the main door that you came in at, and the assembly point is between the cathedral and the library. So thank you for that. I think we are super for it. So I would actually like members to reveal themselves, so that we can, so that people in the room know exactly who's here and on what basis. So obviously, I'll say who I am, and I will start with Tom at the far.
Thanks for that. Councillor Tom Blenkinsop, Labour member for Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston.
Councillor Tim Rippington, member for Brislington East.
Cam Hayward, being councillor for now.
Councillor David Wilcox, representing Lockleys Ward.
Councillor Ellie Freeman, Beanston Wood.
Councillor Guy Potley from Cottonwood, on the committee, but sort of not on the committee, but now substituting Councillor Fraser at least the first hour of the meeting. We'll see where we go from there. Thanks, Chair.
You're very welcome, Guy.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for that. Thank you for making it possible.
Thanks, Councillor Jonathan Happy.
Nicholas Coombes, Western Henrys.
Great. I won't ask officers to introduce themselves now, but I would like officers to introduce themselves when they start talking. That's our independent member.
I'm Jo Williams. I'm the independent member on the committee.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So, apologies for absence is Councillor Fraser. I think that's there we are. Declaration of interest. Do any members have any particular points to make? Declaration is good. And minutes of the last meeting for accuracy first. Do any members have any corrections on the agenda? Or on the minutes? No. Okay. Right. So if we turn then to the detail, there are quite a number of actions that we need to address. On the actions review. So there are a number of actions that have progressed since last time. So I'm generally happy to accept that they've happened. Can I ask members, are there any of the actions they wish to draw attention to today?
Yes, action number 5. A question about the 2 categories of active directory out of scope of the audit. I can't find any mention of that in the draft Fulham report. Just wondered if I'm going to get a verbal answer to that. Please.
Grant will maybe comment on that.
So on, I can't find the page reference unfortunately, you do an IT audit of Active Directory?
Yeah, that's included within the updated audit finance report summary.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. I want to ask a question or two maybe about on item 10, please.
Mm-hmm.
The corporate risk update quarter 2. I'm not quite sure who's going to respond to me on that. But I want to talk about the appendix that's been provided, and I have some questions on that, please.
Okay.
Okay, who do I address my questions to? Sorry, I don't know officers well enough, do I?
So if you haven't got this officer in the room, I can take questions.
Okay, Andy, thank you. Right, well, it's really just about this appendix that has been provided, and it was asked for, yes, in the last meeting. But I do have some questions about it in terms of its, how shall I say, comprehensiveness, completeness, really. I think it's fine as an overall. It's meant to be the risk management policy, yes, statement about that, and it reads fine in that it's very good in saying everything that should be said, of course, in risk management policy. But what I'm missing is any mention, any understanding of the resources that are going to be used to deliver this, or to deliver any strategy that's developed under it. So I wanted to ask about that. And there's a couple of other things as well, really. So Andy, maybe if you can be the messenger. I think it would benefit, and when we get more on this subject, we need a bit of a diagram, really, that shows us how it links to the overall governance framework of the council. That's not coming out in it. There's mention of risk registers, and I got confused. I'm not sure about, have we got 3 levels of risk register, or have we got just 2? Service registers are mentioned, but then it's not entirely clear where they fit. So again, I think a few diagrams would help us to understand better, and help us, particularly if this is a developing and a new approach, to understand better how is it actually going to work. So I guess I can leave it like that, because as you're seeing, the questions are rather general, but really we do need to see when we get this again, or when we get the next stage of it, which I hope is going to be the next meeting, we can see much more clearly how is this going to be delivered, what are the resources that are going to be added to the current resources. There's mention of Zurich supporting it externally, but what about the other impact of the resources within the council, and who is taking responsibility for what, really, and when? So those are the sort of questions that I think it's useful to have had it, and we did ask for it, but I think it does prompt many other questions for me.
Okay, I'll probably cover a couple of those now, but a further discussion with our risk team might be beneficial as well to explain the overall fit of the council. But in terms of the policy, that guides our approach to risk management. We have our corporate risk team that sit within my directorate, but I see risk very much as a responsibility of the whole council and the officers with delegated responsibility. So there isn't an additional resource requirement in terms of implementation of that policy under our existing contractual arrangements with Zurich. They provided some risk advice and support. That will really help our approach in terms of modernising and continuing our approach to risk management across the whole council. So I don't think there is a cost implication of adopting the policy, but also I won't go into detail now, but risk and audit, internal audit and risk is part of our internal governance arrangements, and we have been resetting and reviewing that, so I can ask my team to walk you through that as well, so you can see the overall fit of risk in terms of our officer governance arrangements in the council.
Okay. So then I think, Chair, we need to have it on our next meeting work plan. I'm not sure, I'm not sure quite where that's going to fit, and if it's on there, because in the October meeting, in the response to the internal audit report, we had a summary of the actions that were going to be taken, and there was a pictorial action plan presented there, which talked about a 9-month plan. So we need to see the follow through from that reporting in October, I think, and I would expect it to be in the January meeting. I don't think it's on the work plan at the moment. That's all.
So we'll have to confirm that with the risk manager.
Just to confirm, the
this draft policy was shared just to show you that there was work in progress. So this draft policy needs to be finalized and it will need to come to the audit committee for approval. So you then have that conversation with So this was just being shared as evidence that work is ongoing to review the person, the documents.
So we need to plan the updated policy.
Yes.
At a future meeting,
Yes.
not necessarily for next week.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other points on the action sheet? No? Okay. So, Chair's business. First of all, I'd just like to thank all the officers from all organisations involved in getting the package information to us. There's a huge amount of effort that goes into that. We obviously would have preferred to include the statement of accounts in the original deadline, but we have it in front of us now, and it was quite a lot of effort to put that in place. So I think everyone was familiar with the requirement of that and the work needed. So thanks to people for doing that, and thanks particularly to our clerk for managing such an active collection of supplementary publications, and including Public Forum. So there's certainly a lot that we have in front of us now that we wouldn't have done a couple of weeks ago. I have a question to, I think it's Andy, between Andy and Kim, is the second independent member vacancy. I think we envisaged that would be advertised shortly. I wonder if either of you have a able to comment.
I can, Chair, that helps. Myself, Andy Simba and my colleague Nancy Wars, and I think is also here, met only this morning just to kick-start that process again, and we're looking at various different medium for advertising the role for the second panel member, the second independent member. So we'll hopefully get something advertised this side of Christmas, and we'll be able to give you an update again at the next meeting. Hopefully we'll be able to secure a second independent member of the committee, which is clearly the aspiration.
It is. I'm very mindful we are very dependent on Joe to fulfil that function. And it wasn't easy to find you. And we need to do that. But I'm glad that coincidentally you were able to discuss it this morning. That's tremendous, thank you. Brilliant. Good. So,
is there a programme on that work? So having had the meeting to kick it off this morning, the vacancy arose 6 months ago and not without notice. Is there then a programme of place advert, seek applicants, interview, appoint?
There will be. What we debated previously, we advertised the role through public finance or the websites that attracts finance professionals. However, that didn't secure us 2 independent candidates. So we're just thinking about our route to market, whether we need some assistance to find suitable people who could fulfil the role. So once we settle on that approach in terms of the candidate search, that will determine the timetable a little bit. But that's the nature of the conversation this morning. So we'll be just finalising our timetable in terms of recruitment over the next week or so.
I wonder if you might want to ask Joe's opinion.
I didn't want to offer. I can certainly have, give you my advice and knowledge.
Thank you.
As I know.
Well, I mean, I would recommend that. Thank you.
Perhaps it should be a standing update, as we've had no progress in the last year on this work stream.
I mean, I hope it won't be a standing update, but it will certainly be a constant aspect of this point on the agenda until we have that person in place.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good. Okay, so talking of work plan, so we have our work programme for the next few meetings published, just as an indication of the sorts of things that we expect to be covering for the next few meetings. Do members have any comments or questions on that schedule? Joe.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you once again. I want to ask about our interest and awareness that we need to have regarding financial management. I mean, obviously we have the audited accounts, but I'm talking about the budget management. And I'm aware that is reported, of course, to strategy and resources, perhaps. on a regular basis and is scrutinised by them. But what I want to ask about, and I think it's probably Andy, but whoever wants to answer me, that's fine. Can we have, maybe you've already had this, but not since I've been here. Can we have an outline, I suppose it would be, of the process of the scrutinising of budget management? You know, where does it happen? What are the arrangements for that? I'm not talking about us getting involved in the minutiae of the budget management reports, absolutely not. But what I feel we do need, according to our terms of reference, is assurance about the arrangements for the scrutiny or the monitoring of the budget management information. So,
Do you think it
Yeah.
should like?
Can you comment on what goes to be structuring resources and
Yeah, well, we
finance?
have our public reporting in terms of the council's overall budget position, covering revenue budget, dedicated schools grants, housing and capital against structural resources. But I think to give you that assurance as well in terms of the internal rigour of budget monitoring, so I think that's what you're really asking. That is in part of our internal audit plan as well. So we have got an audit coming up looking at our budget management framework and savings monitoring as well. So I think the corporate audit committee would get assurance from that internal audit finding as well.
yes, of course.
So we're happy to provide a separate briefing to you if you want to see how that also works in practice as well.
Yes, I mean, I'm not talking about a huge amount of work to go into this, by the way. I'm talking about just an overview, which I think we need, probably a one-off
I think
piece of information.
I think we'd get that through the internal audit reports.
Okay, and when does that come?
Similar to, it's just starting.
It's
So
so it will be finalized in early Q4. So if it helps, we can bring the whole report here without regardless of document.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
That'd be good.
to bring it just for information.
Yeah, just get, yeah.
Even if it's a positive
Yes,
finding.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Tremendous, thank you for that.
That's
That would be
good,
really
yeah,
helpful. Good.
that's a good idea, thank you very much.
It's a good suggestion. Brilliant. So this now leads us to public forum. So we have 30 minutes for statements and questions. And we have some information. If anyone hasn't seen, we have a copy in front of us in terms of the responses to questions, or because some information was published today. So I think we're going to start with questions. So the first question is from Anonymous. I don't know if Anonymous is here. I suppose that's an interesting question, how they would justify whether they were anonymous or not. But we've had the response to that. So the second question is from Suzanne Aldrich. I don't know if Suzanne is here. I don't think so. Slightly difficult to see within the context. So the third question is from Dan Ackroyd, who I know is here. So you have up to 2 supplementaries on your question, Dan.
Yeah, so I've got a supplementary for one of my questions about the IFRS 16. My question was about whether the auditors would be looking at how the council has handled assets that have been transferred away from the council, whether they have been handled appropriately under IFRS 16. The answer given only talks about current assets, so I think the question still stands: will the auditors, or can the auditors, look at how the council has handled assets that have been transferred away from the council in the past, say, 5 years, to see if they've been handled appropriately?
I don't know if either Andy or auditors are able to comment on that.
Katie.
So IFRS 16, the main change is around assets that are leased into the council rather than assets that are leased out. So in terms of the financial statements, our main piece of work is on those assets that the council essentially lease in, rather than leased out assets. The IFRS 16 hasn't changed the accounting treatment of those. Our focus is on assets leased in.
Cool. I didn't really understand that, but I'll listen to it again and get clarity, hopefully. And if you don't mind, Mr. Bradbury also asked a question about S16, and the answer given says that officers are confident that the approach taken to the adoption of the reporting standard will not lead to any material audit adjustment. But then in the external audit finding report it says the Council's current calculation estimate a material impact on the financial statements with an estimated right of use asset total of £52 million. That doesn't sound like a trivial thing. So will the audit committee withhold confidence in these accounts until the auditors have done their external work chasing up the journals from the council?
Well, I suspect we will be discussing the impact of leases later in the meeting. Members have been briefed on the work that's been done to assess the impact of leases, so IFRS 16, because that is a change of methodology, and quite a lot of work has been done by our auditors and our officers to give us the final position on that. I'm sure we'll come back to it. But the quality of the work done by our auditors to give us a final position on the impact of lease provisions is very clear. So that assurance is in front of us. Right. Is that a, of course. Is Andrew Lynch here?
Yeah. Hi. Good afternoon. So I have two questions. Well, I had a question about FOIs, and you can see that there's two responses there. Well, I asked an FOI about the Bottle Yard Studios accounts for the past 7 years. And the first response from the head of culture and creative industries said that he hadn't got the accounts. It would take too much time to put them together, which I found profoundly shocking. But then the second answer from the director of Economy of Place, who presumably knows the head of culture and creative industries, said that actually publishing commercial sensitive information would risk prejudicing the studio's position, blah, blah, blah. How can I have two different answers to the same question? I mean, only one of those, the first answer cannot be true if the second answer is true.
I don't know. Is anyone able to contribute?
I can comment, Chair, if I may, and my colleague Ben Hughley may also wish to comment, but I think from an FOI perspective we would first look at whether the statutory limit has been exceeded before proceeding to apply any further exemptions. So your FOI request was refused on that basis in the first instance. The question asked at the S&R committee was answered in a slightly different way by the director in respect of commercially sensitive information, which may well indeed be an exemption that would apply under freedom of information, but given the statutory limit was deemed to be exceeded, it wasn't necessary to consider that as part of determining whether your FOI could proceed. I don't know if my colleague Ben has anything further to add.
I think that's it. The first bit is the statutory time limit around kind of resource time to answer the FOI, which is the bit that that is looked at before, as they mentioned before, any exemptions are kind of looked at.
Well, I don't want to waste all my questions, but why didn't they just answer me with the second question that was commercially sensitive? You either got your act together or you haven't, which is probably another answer I'm going to have. So I've got a suggestion. Do you think the audit committee should have why, let's say, is Elstree Film Studios, which is owned by Hertsmere Council, capable of publishing accounts? They don't deem it commercially sensitive. And they were able to report they only lost £500,000 in 2024, which is quite good because they lost £8 million in 2023. Or you could look at Bad Wolf in Cardiff, which took £4 million, which is the second £4 million they've taken off the Cardiff government, and see their accounts in Companies House. Why is Bristol so useless? They cannot publish accounts of businesses they're running because, believe me, you have no qualifications for running a film business. I do not see Cecil B. DeMille here at all.
No. You don't. I don't know the structure of those other organisations and whether they are parts of the city council that they're in, rather than distinct businesses. I think that might make a difference in terms of what's available. I don't think there's anything much more we can say.
So you don't know your business either, right? Okay.
Okay. So I think that's the end of the questions. We have a number of statements that people have submitted and councillors have read. Is Jen still here? I don't think so. So Dan, you have your statement.
In 2021 and 22, the council was spying on members of the public in retaliation for those people speaking out on how bad the SEND provision was in Bristol. This led to a backlog in SAR cases as people wanted to know if they'd been spied on. The slow processing was not an accident. It was a legal department treating the members of the public as the opposition and treating the council as something to be defended. One cause of slow processing was that members of the staff were not trained how to do their job. It's clear that FOI requests are handled by people manually searching through their inboxes rather than search terms being searched through a specialist retrieval tool, which is one of the reasons why FOI requests are such a burden for the council. The external company that was meant to help progress SAR applications were not given instructions on how to do it, and so weren't able to clear the SAR backlog. Whoopsie-daisy, we should have given them instructions. There are multiple things to note in the ICO enforcement notice. The ICO enforcement notice is explicitly calling out BCC for lying. In particular, the bit, this contradiction has not been properly explained in the representations. It is also clear that an argument was being made that the council was not obliged to comply with the law due to financial constraints. This feels like a crime scene where people have deliberately chosen to block lawful FOI and SAR requests. Which reminds me of the housing department, that the state of the housing stock was kept hidden from councillors even after they explicitly sought better information was a disgrace. For years, people have been living in mouldy, unsafe homes. Many properties have fallen into a state of repair which will cost a huge amount of money to fix, if it even makes economic sense to repair them. Fixing the housing department so that it has an IT system that can actually be used to maintain the council homes to a decent standard is a monumental task that is going to take years. Due to the size of that task, I think there is very little chance that the council will be able to meet the energy efficiency standards for 2030. While Bristol Council was keeping the state of the housing department a secret past the election, Marvin Rees was being awarded an OBE for services to local government. This is a complete disgrace. And finally, the report into the BCC mishandling of FOI and SAR requests includes some comparisons of bad statistics for other authorities in an attempt to show that BCC isn't that bad. I have to note, Liverpool City Council, where a former mayor has been charged with bribery. The London Borough of Enfield, a former mayor has been sanctioned for using office to support visa applications. Glasgow City Council, senior officers received over £1 million in early retirement and redundancy payments that were approved by some of the beneficiaries themselves. A failing FOI service is a very worrying sign.
So I believe that brings us. Yes. Should have said that. Sorry, the final statement is from Councillor Bales, who isn't in the rooms. So that brings us to the end of public call. Thank you to everyone who's been who's participated with questions or statements or in any other way. You are, of course, welcome to stay for as long as the meeting is as you like. Thank you. So we move on to item 9, which is the findings of external audit, which is one of our most consequential pieces of work. This is a document which we, as members, are being asked to approve. So, Baron, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Barry Morris, I'm the key audit partner from Grant Thornton. We reported to you at the last audit committee that the audit was running behind where we expected it to be. I'm pleased to say that significant progress has now been made in relation to the delivery of the audit. The only really substantive piece of work that remains outstanding is in relation to IFRS 16, and that's because the information has only just been received by ourselves. The audit team have been redeployed to other audits, so we are looking to get these resources back to try and complete that work at the earliest opportunity. Sorry, members, now not a good time to get a frog in the throat. As I've said, the delays in the audit has meant that there has been significantly additional resource put into the audit as a result of that. Now, when we get to the end of the audit, we will discuss the overruns with Andy, and we'll report that back to you as part of the few variations that we need to discuss and get approved by PSAA Limited. There are no significant changes to the underlying performance on the Council's comprehensive income and expenditure statement, and we are proposing that we will issue an unmodified audit report in due course. Because the status of the work, we are looking to see if the Council would want to, or the committee is prepared to give delegated authority, perhaps through yourself, Chair, and to the and through Andy as the Director of Finance, Section 151 officer, so that once that work on IFRS 16 has been concluded, assuming that there are no further material changes to the accounts, then the accounts and the audit opinion can be issued. Chair, I would also like to just raise one other issue before I hand over to Katie, who will go through a little bit more detail of the audit. On page 104 of the accounts, you've got the draft audit opinion in there. Now, included within that at the moment is the wording that we have to include in relation to the value for money significant weaknesses that we've identified. And those have been drawn out of the auditor's annual report that was presented to the October Audit Committee. Management have subsequently challenged the findings in relation to the backlog and the designation notice. So we've agreed that we would undertake some further work to determine whether or not we can either remove that recommendation or de-escalate it, which would mean that it wouldn't need to be included in the final version of the audit opinion. I'm bringing it to your attention because the audit opinion is here for you to note, and that may be a change to that audit opinion. So we've effectively presented a worst case scenario for members to be aware of. Chair, I'll hand over to Katie in about 5 seconds, but I'd just also like to say that joining us today is Alyssa Gomez. She's our in-charge auditor, and she's responsible for managing the day-to-day activity. And it's always nice, she's been working on this audit for many hundreds of hours, so to see what it's like and the conclusion of the work. So we've invited her along to see the workings of the audit committee. And so if there are any particularly tricky questions, Alyssa is here to answer.
Well, I hope you don't disappoint.
Sorry, before we move to the detail, can I just clarify, what is the recommendation today? So I don't believe we have a paper recommendation. You suggested that this is a report to approve, but I think Barry's just suggested it's to note and to delegate approval. Have I misunderstood that?
I think you look to officers to confirm, but it's for you to approve the acceptance of the ICT 16, the audit findings report, and subject to there being no material changes, then delegated authority given for the final version to be approved, and then the audit opinion to be issued. Might be getting my approvals mixed up.
That's correct. So it's my understanding is today the committee will be approving the audit findings as presented, recognising there may be some final changes needed, but that's giving or recognising that that would be something for the chair to consider in conversation with myself as Section 151 officer. I don't agree with that.
So that's my understanding. We don't have a recommendation in either paper, do we? We don't have it in our substantive papers. There's no recommendation on the main paper. And there's also no recommendation in the supplementary
There isn't a covering.
Yeah.
It's a covering report and then
Yeah.
says that.
Page 32 of the report.
So there is a recommendation, but it doesn't.
But it doesn't have that language.
It doesn't have that language, and it doesn't take into account that delegated authority bit, which might make it a bit clearer.
So there's a recommendation that it's wrong.
Yes.
But we are being precise here, so fair enough.
Perfect, thank you. Great. Over to you.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm Katie Library and I'm the audit manager. I'm just going to briefly take you through some of the detail of the report. So if I take you to page 12 of the pack, it sets out our current position regarding IFRS 16 lease implementation. We've obviously covered this briefly already, but the latest financial statements that are in your pack do now reflect the impact on the balance sheet and supporting notes of IFRS 16. We have some resource where we have to take a detailed review in early December. Particular focus will be on the right of use asset on the balance sheet, which is £49 million.
Can I clarify something? Sorry, how do you want us to ask you questions, Katie? As you go along, or?
Happy for to go along.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm starting to get slightly confused now about the position of IFRS 16. Are you saying that the work that Andy's team has done and the figures they've come up with and the balance sheet draft that has been presented to you, are you saying you have still got to verify that? Right.
Yeah, so if I can kind of clarify, so the original draft statement of accounts that were published didn't include IFRS 16 figures because they were deemed they were material.
Mm-hmm.
We challenged management on that. Management have then undertaken a range of exercises to value those works, and that's identified, as you'll see, a material figure of about 52 million.
Mm-hmm.
Those calculations, so management have now updated that in the updated version of the accounts, and the accounts that you will be approving today will include those figures. Hence, once we've gone through those detailed calculations, and to clarify, we only got those at the end of last week. Once we've clarified and gone through those, assuming we don't identify any significant issues that would change that figure by a material amount, you would still be able, the accounts would still be materially accurate. Should we identify any work or any issues or errors where there was a material amount or a material error, then we would reflect that in an updated audit findings report will come back to the audit committee. So we wouldn't expect any material changes to the accounts to be made without you further reapproving those accounts.
And you will be applying your materiality threshold of 27.5 million or whatever it is to that valuation of 52 million or whatever it is.
So we have the concept of performance materiality, which reduces that down from the headline materiality. But yes, if it looks like it's a material error or getting close to material, then we would come back to the audit committee and not seek to sign it off under delegation.
But you haven't started your work yet on that. Okay.
So there are three different types of leases that are affected.
Yes.
We've selected the sample for the biggest element of that.
Okay.
The information has only just come through, and we're awaiting the other two elements of that. So officers haven't yet had the opportunity to provide that information. But the single largest lease which has been impacted, which I think is about 13 million off the top of my head, has been selected for testing, and officers have provided us the backing documentation to support that.
Can I echo Joe's question about material from the original estimate of 2.7 or the revised estimate of 52.8?
So our materiality has always been 27.2 million.
Yes.
The initial assertion by officers, the management and the draft accounts that were presented were that they didn't consider IFRS 16 to be material. But now undertaken that work and have identified that it is. So that's the materiality benchmark that we've assessed against. So that's why we're having to do further work now, because it's now a material balance that we need to get to.
And a material change from the current position to the final audit would be what? Because it seems to me like given that the original position was 0 anything which is above zero is now a material change on that.
So no, the accounts that you've got today which you're approving now includes that 52 million. So if there was a change from that, so if we determined that it was 18 million pounds less, or so if it was 34 million, or it was more than 70 million, then we would come back.
So current accounts is a new baseline, not what you were given then.
That's right,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Page 14 of the pack sets out our approach to group audit. The component that we undertake the most work on is in respect to Bristol Waste, which has material expenditure stream in the group accounts. We've undertaken our review of Bristol Waste auditor's file and are awaiting our final documentation from the auditors to be able to finalise our work, which we are expecting imminently. Page 17 of the report and 18 sets out our materiality levels, so this determines where we focus our audit work. We have a reporting threshold, which essentially any errors above our reporting threshold, we have to report to those charged with governance in the adjustment section of this report. Page 20 of the report just summarises where we are in terms of our significant risk areas. There are no changes in terms of our risk assessment since we brought our audit plan to you. In terms of most of these findings, we have completed the majority of work except for IFRS 16. The only thing to bring to your attention is within our work on valuation of land and buildings, we did identify a small number of academy schools that are still on the council's balance sheet, which should be disposed of when the academy is converted over. So those have now been put through the accounts that presented to you today. It has been put through as a prior period adjustment, although there was not a material impact on the balance sheet. Other than that, work on all the other risk areas is at completion stage now. In terms of other findings, we had detailed discussions with management and the legal advisors in respect of equal pay claims and the impact on the 24-25 accounts. And we set out on page 32 that the council has added a contingent liability into the updated accounts in respect of this. Page 40 of the pack sets out our findings in terms of the IT audit. We did bring this slide to the last audit committee, and we've just added a little bit of clarification at the bottom of page 40 to explain the approach with the Active Directory. It's just underneath with an asterisk on page 40 of the pack, just to set out the IT's approach in terms of testing Active Directory, which I know was a question at the last audit committee.
Can I come back on that?
Of course.
Thank you. Sorry, Chair, for butting in. So I was expecting to see some sort of determination about whether the Active Directory infrastructure that is deployed by the council is resilient or not. So for instance, if an Active Directory domain controller is deployed without redundant networking, or it's deployed in an area that is public, for instance, nobody would do that, it's mad. I would like to see some qualification that the Active Directory infrastructure of the council is deployed in such a resilient, secure fashion, and you don't seem to be quantifying that at all.
So the scope of our work is as we've set out. So it's not an area that we've undertaken specific work on because we've not done this.
Yeah.
So that's why it's we've said it's not in scope for that work the way that you described it. Whether there's specific internal audit work or IT work that they've undertaken, but as far as the integrity of the financial statements is concerned, we've not deemed that to be a relevant risk, but we've undertaken detailed work.
Okay. I'm interested in that decision because I do think it's materially important to the way that Active Directory infrastructure is implemented. And perhaps Ben might be able to give us some thoughts on that. Thanks.
Also, I can't comment on the audit scope itself, but I think it's something that potentially we can look at with internal audit colleagues rather than talking about something that they can't or that it's not in their scope.
Thank you. Can that be added to the action sheet, please?
Well, it's a good question, David, in terms of what's internal audit work is needed to give assurance on the active network. I've no idea. So it is a question. How difficult it is to answer and when it might be answered is a slightly secondary question.
Also, how
But you-
much
you want to
detail
make-
can be shared with the public about our secure information technology infrastructure. But I think this committee needs some reassurance that it is done properly.
Absolutely. No, this is a really fair and fair enough. I think we have comments possibly from Joe and from Tim.
A question, please, Chair, from me. Are we to take it that you didn't, the scope of your work here didn't include any assessment of integration of systems?
So we would typically do that where there's been a new system implementation in the year. There's been no new system implementation in the year.
Right.
So that's why it was deemed appropriate to do further work on that.
Okay, but these are the main, are these the main IT systems of the council?
Yes.
They are.
I should also say that there is a very detailed IT report that supplements this, so we only include this at a high level. We will be including more commentary as we identified any concerns.
Right. Okay, thank you.
And also, there are actually some quite important changes to the IT environment over this year and next year. So you may well, particularly in the housing area, so you may well be looking at different systems in the future. Tim, do you
Sorry, I've got a couple of questions. Just on the academy schools that were showing on our balance sheet when they shouldn't have been because they're now academy schools. I think you said that turned out to be a non-material change. I'm just wondering roughly what the valuation for those 3 schools was, that they were low enough to not be a material change, because I would have thought schools would have quite a significant value.
So the net book value impact on the balance sheet is about 14 million. Yeah, about 14 million impact on the balance sheet.
Right.
The reason we required the prior period adjustment to go through is the disclosure in the PPE note itself, because we have the gross book value of the assets as well as the net book value. That was material gross book value before the depreciation was taken off. So the disclosure note had to be amended in the prior year, so that had to then flow through into the balance sheet. If it hadn't been for that disclosure note, we would have needed that prior period adjustment, but it was just because the disclosure was. But in terms of balance sheet impact, about 14 million.
Right, okay, thanks. And the other question about the equal pay claims, I'm just wondering if they were found to be valid, how significant they might be. I mean, we all know what's gone on in Birmingham and you know how horrendous that's been. I'm presuming we're not looking at anything like that significance of this, because you've kind of played it down here.
So the claims that have been received, again, would perhaps turn to Randy to provide more detail from a finance perspective on this. But the claims that have been submitted are at a very early stage. There's been limited review of the validity of those claims, and therefore there is no figure that can yet be estimated as to whether or not there's any merit in those claims whatsoever. So if they are successful and there's a lot of them, then that may produce a material figure, but there is nothing that we can look at this stage to say whether or not that provision is there. And again, we've spoken to the council's legal advisors to confirm the stage of progress that they're at. What the council has agreed to do, to be super prudent, is include a contingent liability within the accounts to say, actually, we are aware of these claims that have been received, but they're at a very early stage. We can't determine their validity or if there's any liability that may arise as it. So that's why they've got the contingent liability in there. And I'm not sure if you want to expand.
No, you're absolutely right, Murray. So in terms of quantification, we're not able to quantify at the moment. We can't form a view on likelihood either. So what we did feel the right thing to do for transparency is to create a note in contingent liability part of the statement of accounts to reference the claims. And that's the right approach to take.
Okay. I'm very aware that we interrupted our colleagues on the page to do with IT investigation. We're already strayed quite widely from that topic. Is there something we desperately need to ask now, Dave, before we allow people to move towards their opinion?
Yes, I do have a question that's not related to the IT stuff, it's something else like that, but I would like some closure on that.
Okay.
So on page 27 of the bundle, or 25 of your report, we're talking about the valuation of investment properties. In the bottom right-hand corner of that page, we talk about we evaluated these errors and an overall project error of £1.97 million was calculated. No other issues were identified. So, do we know whether that was a positive or negative 1.97 million? Because I think that's quite important. And also, isn't that above the reporting threshold materiality of 1.36 million? So shouldn't it be noted as something else?
Yeah, so when we come on to the audit adjustment slide later on in the report, it is included within that as an unadjusted error because it's a projected error that's below materiality. But as you rightly said, it's above our reporting threshold, so we have to include it. Within that slide as well, it says that it was actually two areas. The 1.97 is our projection of the absolute of the two errors, but they actually net off. So one went one way and one went the other way in terms of the two errors we found. But the 1.97 was kind of an absolute figure that we had to calculate, if that makes sense.
And was that positive or negative?
Well, so one of the errors, they kind of cancel each other out, the errors, but we've just added them together to do the projection, because that's just how we do it.
That's the size of the error.
Yeah, the kind of size of the quantity of the error, but it doesn't really mean that there's a
right.
Because one went one way and one went the other. So we've kind of tried to put it in here by saying that they net each other off.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I feel like we should let you move further in your report.
Despite burning questions. I think it's, the situation here is an answer leads to another question.
Please continue.
So if I can just take you to those audit adjustment slides, so we start on page 46 of the pack. So all of the adjustments that are set out in the adjusting statements and the disclosure statements tables have been adjusted in the accounts by management, so adjusted in the accounts that you've got today in the pack. We do have some unadjusted errors. Those are set out on page 51 of the pack. These are all kind of projected errors that we've identified through the course of the audit that go above our reporting threshold, but they're all below materiality and they are projections, so they haven't been adjusted by management in the accounts. Page 53 of the pack just sets out our action plan, so any recommendations that we've made from this year's audit, and then any recommendations we've made from the prior year's audit that are still outstanding, we've included those in here as well so that we can follow these all up going forward. Page 58 of the pack just sets out a summary of the value for money work. As Barry mentioned earlier, we did bring you the value for money report at the last audit committee. So we're just having a look at the planning application, significant risk that Barry mentioned. So we'll be finalising that with management over the next couple of weeks, but otherwise nothing's changed since we brought that to you in October. Don't plan to go through any of the rest of the report in detail, but we're happy to take any further questions.
Jonathan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Katie, for your report. I just wanted to ask a question on the unadjusted misstatements, and this is relating to the creditors testing. Clearly, the error that you found of 3.895 million is well below the materiality threshold for adjusting the accounts, but it's above the level that you need to disclose. Could you provide a bit of detail on what this error relating to creditors was? For example, was it accruals that had been missed from the accounts altogether, or was it invoices that hadn't been processed? Is it a combination of those things? Can you be a bit more explicit on what this actually relates to?
Yeah, so this was from our sample testing that we undertook, where we recalculated the accuracy of the creditor figures and where we found differences between our calculations and what was posted into the ledger. So the 3.8 million was is a projected error based on a number of much smaller errors that we identified in our testing, which we then had to project over the population to identify what the extrapolated error was. So it was a small number of kind of differences between, in terms of the accuracy of the calculations of those parameters.
I see. So I guess that when the accounts were prepared, estimates were put in based on the information that was available, and then when further information came to light, that differed from the estimates that were processed.
That's right. So that's the way that we look at the testing. So we look at both, we do testing from creditor schedule to bank and back to creditor schedule to see whether or not there's any errors. So where there's been accruals made and those are slightly different, then we would identify where those are. So what we would do, just clear for everybody here, so these errors, we look at the total population that we've looked at, we look at the error rate within the samples that we've tested, and then where we've identified some errors, we then extrapolate that over the total population, because obviously we don't cover everything.
Yeah.
So that's why we don't make the council change the accounts on extrapolation, because it's a statistical calculation as to what the error could be. And then we determine whether or not, if it's close to materiality, we would do further testing to refine that.
Fine. The schedule suggests that this relates to the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, but is there a possibility that some of it could be capital, or is it all related to the income and expenditure statement?
I think it's all related to the income and expenditure statement. Yeah.
Thank you.
Nick, and then Joe.
Thanks. Can I ask about pensions? IFRIC 14 asset ceiling is not explained in the text, but I would like you to explain it for me, please, to understand how we apparently lost £63.5 million because of that accounting adjustment and what it really means.
Okay, I'll try my best. So IFRIC 14 is, it basically limits the measurement of a defined benefit asset. So where the council has a defined benefit asset, the actuary then has to consider whether there are additional liabilities in respect of that, in respect of onerous funding commitments. And this is to do with the council's level of positive secondary commitments. It's calculated by the actuary, so as councils get either into a surplus position or close to a surplus position, the actuary then has to consider whether there are any of these onerous funding commitments, which would then bring them essentially back into a deficit position. And in this case, the actuary did identify that. I think in the prior year, they considered whether there was any of those commitments in 23-24 as the deficit got smaller and closer to certain position, but there wasn't any last year. But yeah, this year they have been impacted by that. But we do rely on our actuary. The management's actually the ones who do those calculations and things.
So when your pension fund goes into credit, loads of financial commitments suddenly appear that aren't there when you're in deficit. Is that what you just said?
So what the purpose of IFRIC 14 is to do, so it's a new area really for local government, because we're not used to there being potential assets, we're just used to being large liabilities. Now, IFRIC 14 was introduced a number of years ago, where actually there was the crisis in the corporate sector, where actually what you found was you had lots of corporate entities were seeing that they had surpluses on their pension schemes, and they were taking those surpluses out. And then the market downturned, and then suddenly the surplus evaporated and turned into a big liability. So what IFRIC 14 does is, where you're getting close to that level, you're then asking the actuary to look at a number of different calculations and projections that they wouldn't normally include within their actuarial evaluations. So that's there to make sure that, and what we often find is that is identifying further reductions to any asset. Now you may still end up in an asset position, but normally there are quite large movements down.
Would I be right in assuming that the opposite position doesn't apply? That if your fund is a lot in deficit, you ask the actuary if they can knock off some liabilities and it goes back up to credit?
we test all of the assumptions that are made by actuaries on an annual basis. The key risk here is just making sure that assets aren't being recognised that aren't real, and that's why that process has gone through.
But we have to recognise the deficit. We assume that the deficit is real. Why can't we assume that the credit is real?
And again, that gets picked up through the triennial valuations, and they go through. The next triennial valuation is due this year, so this is the third year of the current triennial valuation, so that will all be picked up in the next round.
The scenario of having a genuine surplus in the pension fund and then being able to do something else with it is so terrorising.
Well, it's
we'll see when it happens.
Because we've been in a low interest rate world for the last 10 years, but in the past pension funds did have surpluses because the local government scheme is a fully invested one.
Yes.
I was on the board of the Open Pension Fund for 4 years, and it may well be that we are now moving into a positive interest rate and positive return territory where we can again make money. And it seems that if RIC 14 means that we're not allowed to make money, if it looks like you're being successful, then new rules apply.
I think it means that you won't reduce your contribution rates unnecessarily. I think that's probably the impact. But thank you for the question. Thank you for explaining that, and congratulations to anyone who had IFRIC 14 on their bingo card. Jo, you had a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm going to stay away from the pension subject. You'll be glad to hear. I have a question on page 60, please, regarding the middle column there, and officers might want to comment on this as well. I'm just not sure about what you mean when you say there. You're talking there about, appears to be anyway, strategic risks aligned to corporate objectives, and then you talk about updates of the corporate risk register are done quarterly. And then you say internal audit gave a reasonable assurance opinion for 24-25, reflecting improved savings delivery and the audit action and implementation. Can we clarify what audit that was, please? Because when I read it first, I thought, hold on a second, the risk management audit received a limited assurance opinion. So I'm taking it that this isn't about the risk management audit, internal audit then. Am I right or am I wrong? Page 60.
I think there are two things here. When we did the second delivery for 24-25, it was reasonable assurance, but previous it was limited assurance. But in last year it was reasonable, it was significant improvement in terms of delivering the plans. But the risk management was limited assurance. I can't just remember the timing. Remember that the audit committee we received a report this year actually on risk management. So
we received it in July.
Yeah, but so this is about 24-25, and I think the limited assurance report for last year was completed this year. Yeah. So this relates to internal audit work. Yeah, this is about internal audit work, and that's reflect 24-25. But the latest risk management audit report is limited assurance, which we published this year. So it will be probably for 25-26.
Okay, so this statement is factually correct, and that's all I'm just double checking. Is it factually correct?
No, I think depending on what you use, but I'm absolutely convinced that 24-25 saving delivery was reasonable, and the risk report, the risk audit report, the risk audit was limited assurance, and this is what came to the audit committee. But I'm not sure about just the timing.
So just clarifying, yes, the statement is factually correct. The internal audit gave an overall reasonable assurance for the financial year 24-25, and that's what this comment is reflecting. Okay. It's not reflecting an individual assessment of an individual internal audit review. It's looking at the overall assessment of internal audit across the year and the head of internal audit opinion.
Oh, well, maybe that should be clarified then, I would suggest. Maybe you need to say here in their annual opinion or something like that, so that it doesn't lead to confusion, because it doesn't say that.
Yeah, we can update that in
You-
relation to
yes. You don't define actually what the reasonable assurance was given for.
So the point is, it's the chief internal auditor's annual opinion. It's
Yes,
not an assessment of an
Yeah.
individual area.
Yes, you need to say annual opinion then, at least, I think there, because otherwise I think it could lead to confusion. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's the end of questions. So is that the end of your report, Katie?
it is, you'll see that the letter of representation is also on
Yeah,
the
right.
agenda as well, which needs separate.
Oh, sorry.
Hi. Just, it's a quick one, but just noting on page 56 of the bundle, the council are unable to provide breakdown evidence to support the calculation of the depreciable balance of the highways assets. Why were we unable to provide the breakdown evidence, and noting that that still is not yet addressed despite the recommendation being closed? Is this something that might form a problem later? Is that going to come back as an issue, or is that relatively trivial?
So this is a national issue around the highways network asset, and it's resulted in a change in the way that all local authorities produce their financial statements. So you've now got infrastructure assets which are basically taken out of that main property, plant and equipment note and disclosed separately. So the issue that was identified by auditors about 4 or 5 years ago was councils would spend money on roads, resurfacing roads and various infrastructure. But when they were resurfacing or replacing a road, what we found was there wasn't a similar depreciation. So normally what would happen is if you had a building and it was demolished, then its value would go from a value to nothing because there's no asset there anymore. When you were looking at the resurfacing of a road, the expenditure continued to be capitalised, but there was no reduction to take away the asset that had effectively been removed. So I was used to liken it at the time that eventually you would get to an asset whereby the road had gone up so much by its value that you need to step back to cross it because you wouldn't be able to get over it. So this is what we're just recommending, that actually the council needs to, as with many other authorities, needs to reflect the fact that where it does resurfacing work or other major work on roads and other assets, footpaths, etc., that they look to separately capture what is it that they're replacing and then eliminate that bit. So that's why there's a statutory override in respect of infrastructure.
But nothing too worrying in that regard then?
Nothing, it's a technical accounting issue.
Does that mean that all infrastructure should be depreciated each year, or only when you've resurfaced it so that the net effect is zero?
Yeah, so that's exactly the point. So infrastructure asset is depreciated each year, like all assets are, but where there's a significant event that means that something is removed, so I'm just trying to use the example of the road, then actually you've disposed of that and you never see any disposals on the infrastructure side. So actually all you see is the gross book value increasing in value and consequently the net book value increasing in value, although the assets that were spent on it are no longer there.
The thing that's removed from an old road are the potholes.
The philosophy of whether it's possible, what's removed when you're filling a pothole is something that is above all of our pay grade, I think. Thank you for the report. So the recommendation, as we understand it, is to approve the report that we have in front of us and to delegate the ability to sign this off in its final version subject to no material changes. Is that correct with the recommendation, Barry?
Absolutely. And again, just to reassure members, if there are anything that we think needs to come back to this committee, then we will come back to this committee. We won't sign off the opinion unless we're comfortable that you're fully aware of what needs to be reported.
Thank you.
Jane, can we just have that amended recommendation written down and read back to us so that we know exactly what it is that we're approving?
Do you know that?
Yes,
Do you want Barry to say it aloud again?
So you are being asked to approve the report
and to delegate the ability to sign off in its final version subject to no material changes to the Chair and to the Director of Finance.
Yes.
Yes.
Section
I'll tidy those words up, but essentially that's...
Section 151.
Yeah, section 151.
So we're not approving the report. We're asked to delegate approval of the report to the Chair and Finance Officer, subject to there not being any material changes.
No, so you approve this report
Okay.
and you approve the accounts subject to there being no material changes. If there are any material changes, then the report and the accounts will come back to this committee.
So there's no delegation to the Chair and Finance Officer.
For the accounts.
So it is for the accounts. For the
It's a
accounts.
report.
Let's not talk about the accounts because we're currently looking at the external auditor's report.
The accounts have to be approved at the date of the that we sign the audit opinion. So as we've said, the audit hasn't been completed. In an ideal world, this would be coming to you, you would approve your accounts, I'd go back to the office and I would produce the audit opinion. But because there's still work that's outstanding, we can't do that. So it's the approval of the final version of the accounts which will be signed. And what we're saying to you is, as long as there are no changes or material changes to those accounts, you've approved these accounts.
That's fine. So we've got two items. Item 10 is the external auditor's report. Item 11 is the accounts. We have two motions, we have two votes. So I want to know what
I think that item 9 is the external auditor's
That's 9 and 10.
report and 10 is the final account.
Yeah, fine. Still two of them.
Yes. Yes. Well, that was quite right. I agree with you, Stuart. We need a
Well, we haven't.
a recommendation for both of them.
Yeah. I feel like we haven't dealt with the accounts yet.
No.
I'm not getting too excited about that.
Yeah, can I say? Okay, so just to clarify, I think the auditors have given you their annual report. They are asking you to approve this annual report. That's what this conversation is about, for you to approve this annual report. That's it. Yep. And then you then go on to that statement of accounts, where you requested to approve the accounts and then delegate the signing of the statement of account to the Chair and section 151. But you need, if there are material changes, then the accountants will come to you and then you have to look at that. But if there's no material change, they can delegate. So I think let's deal with this first.
Thank you.
You just need to approve this audit report first, and then you can then deal with the item number 10. That's very easy, but to combine them, I think perhaps that's confusing. Let's just so consider this report first.
Is Barry happy with that formulation? So we are just voting to approve the report that you have given us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, and then the next item.
Yes. Great. I recommend, let's do that. Who would like to second that? Nick. Right. Let's vote on that. All in favour? All. Thank you. Everyone in opposition to that? No, against that? And anyone who would like to abstain? Keeps it interesting.
Chair,
Thank you.
just to clarify, I don't vote as an independent member, okay? So I'm not abstaining, I'm just not voting.
Yes, that is correct. Brilliant. Thank you. So, final account.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So I'm just going to open this item and ask Ben to walk through some of the headlines and the accounts. Firstly, I want to thank our finance team and also colleagues at Grant Thornton. It's always challenging bringing the accounts together when we have accounting standard change, also and IFRS 16 has been one of those. So that has impacted our timetable, some capacity challenges, but the team's worked hard. We've worked in collaboration with Grant Thornton as well. So weekly meetings on the strict timetable, and that's allowed us to present accounts today. So I think in terms of just the opening statements and the accounts, it's good to note actually that whilst we're talking about the technicality of the accounts, the financial performance accounts as well in 24-25, it was a challenging financial year, and I'm pleased to say that the council's revenue budget position landed in a fully funded position with no unhandled reserves, or made use of its general fund earmark reserve. So that is a positive position to land in, and also the capital programme of the council spent £269 million, with 146 million of that in HRA areas of housing expenditure. So that's positive to see that investment as well in Bristol. So the council also included the annual governance statement, and we previously discussed that in the corporate audit committee, but it's good to note that that's included in the final statement. And then we have the accounts themselves, and Ben will walk through some headlines there.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm Ben Jenkins, I'm the Finance Business Partner for Technical and Accounting. The Statement of Accounts for 24-25 has been prepared under the CIPA Code of Practice, and today I'm going to take you through the main headlines and the key changes following the audit. So first, the headlines. This year, the net cost of services was around £575 million, up significantly from last year due to inflation and demand pressures, particularly in social care and education. We recorded an accounting surplus on the provision of services of around £59 million, and this reflects statutory adjustments rather than extra cash. Total reserves increased to just over £3 billion, driven by property revaluations and pension gains, although usable reserves fell by around £56 million because of capital projects and earmarked allocations. Cash at year end was £43 million, down from last year, reflecting investment in major projects. Looking at the comprehensive income and expenditure statement, it shows the accounting cost of services, not the controllable budget. It includes technical adjustments like depreciation and pensions costs. Adult communities and children's education saw increases due to demand and inflation, while growth and generation fell because of capital accounting adjustments. And the dedicated school grant moved from a surplus into a £29 million deficit. On the lower part of the CIS, property revaluations added around £125 million, and the pension remeasurement added around £132 million. Together with the surplus on services, this gave a total comprehensive income of roughly £360 million. Onto our movement in reserves. On usable reserves, which is money we can spend, that fell by about £56 million. On our unusable reserves, which are accounting reserves that we can't spend, that rose by over £370 million, mainly from property revaluations and pension changes. Overall, total reserves increased by £316 million, strengthening the balance sheet without affecting council affairs. Looking at the balance sheet, net assets grew by £360 million to just over £3 billion. Long-term assets increased significantly, reflecting property revaluations and also leased assets in IFRS 16, which I'll talk about shortly. Current assets fell slightly, mainly lower cash and debtors. Current liabilities rose, while long-term liabilities fell due to pension adjustments. Talking now about the audit adjustments, the things that we've changed in this set of accounts. So several changes were agreed during the audit to ensure compliance and clarity. The most significant adjustment was the reclassification of the dedicated schools fund reserve of £9.3 million. We also improved disclosures, clarified the cash flow statement and updated supporting notes. Other changes included correcting academy school disposals, updating business rates pooling entries, and implementing IFRS 16 lease accounting. The remaining projected errors are minor and well below materiality. Going on then to IFRS 16 to do with leases, this has been one of the most significant changes this year. Previously, many leases were off the balance sheet. Under IFRS 16, we now show the right to use the asset on the balance sheet and the related liability as well. To get to a position of proper disclosure, we carried out a detailed review of all lease arrangements across the council. This included identifying leases, and we did that by working with services and the internal valuation team and external valuers to compile a complete list of property and equipment leases, including peppercorn leases where we pay no rent and we still control the property. We also assess lease terms, so for each lease we confirm start dates, end dates, payment schedules and any renewal options to calculate the correct liability. We evaluated the valuation and then the proper recognition by calculating the present value of future lease payments, recognising the right of use asset on the balance sheet, and we updated the accounting policy and notes. So we revised our accounting policy to reflect our IFRS 16 requirements and added detailed disclosures in the notes, including maturity analysis and impact on the balance sheet. So we're currently working closely with Grant Thornton to validate our approach, ensuring the disclosures meet Pacific Code and IFRS standards. For Bristol, IFRS 16 means adding about £52 million of right-of-use assets to the balance sheet. This improves transparency and aligns us with national standards. A few additional headlines worth noting: the pension liability fell sharply from 235 million to 103 million thanks to actuarial gains. Business rates appeals provision remains broadly stable at around 22 million. The collection fund ended the year with a £6 million deficit after distributing council tax and business rates. The group accounts show net assets of over £3 billion and a surplus on services of around £59 million. So that's a summary of the key figures and the adjustments made during the audit, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So thank you, Ben. Does anyone have any questions? I would have been disappointed.
I'll just make a very minor point if I can. The figure for total comprehensive income and expenditure in the version that we have in front of us is 316 million. In the draft, which is on the council's website, it's 295 million. So difference of 21 million. Some of that you've explained, and obviously there's probably a number of relatively minor adjustments that make up that difference. But I do think it would be helpful to have a tracking schedule in future so we can see exactly what the difference is made up of. I know that's not something which is normally produced, but I think that members would find it helpful.
Yeah, that's something we keep internally, so I'm happy to provide that answer.
It's a very minor thing, but hopefully a positive thing. I just wanted to say how, as somebody who is not an accountant or has a lot of background in this, it was really helpful how this is laid out and how it's explained. There's a lot of narrative in there that for the layperson, I think there's a lot of really good explanation. I just wanted to recognise the work that we've gone into that in terms of things like a glossary and just trying to make it relatively accessible.
Any other comments? No? Okay. That's great. So, so this is the one with the amended recommendation. Is this correct? Yes. So the recommendation is not to approve the accounts. The recommendation is to delegate approval of the accounts to me into the section 151 officer, assuming no material changes. Is that correct? No. Close. Close. So close.
So I think it should be that the audit committee approves the audited statement of accounts for the year ended 31 March and delegates the sign off of the final statement of accounts to the chair in section 151, subject to no material changes. Because if I think that's what I think, because if the audit committee doesn't make that, that I don't know whether and valid.
Yes, Barry will have the documents to issue to me on the completion of the external audit work. So I think it is the finalisation of the external auditor opinion. And that's the delegation, isn't it? It's the sign-off.
But we do approve
the
what's in front of us.
To be clear, Barry, the sort of orders, you are happy for us to approve the accounts that we have in front of us?
So you're approving the accounts that are in front of you.
Okay.
What's your recommendation on these accounts? Have you audited them completely? I think your report says that you haven't.
So our work is substantially complete. There are some outstanding matters, the most principal of which is IFRS 16.
Yes.
We'll go through that again. When that work is complete, so the outstanding work may identify further errors. As long as those errors are not material in either individually or in aggregate, then we would ask management to change them if they want to make any adjustments. If they're not material, I would expect Andy to say, no, they're not material, in which case the accounts that you've got before you today would continue to stand and therefore would be approved unchanged. There may be, Andy may feel generous and say, actually I will change that 5 million, which would be a small change, but it would not be a material change. Should we identify anything material, then it would come back to committee.
So there are two separate questions there.
We can't approve accounts.
Well, that is, yes, that is in my mind.
Yeah.
But you are happy anyway. So we are doing two things. We are accepting, if that's the right, accepting? Is that right? We're accepting the report we've been given, and we are delegating responsibility to sign off the final accounts. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Just to confirm, we have done this in previous years.
So just to respond to Nicholas's, but my understanding is that we are approving what's in front of us. If there was a material change, that would be a different set of accounts, and we would then have to approve that. So we're not unapproving these, we would just be approving the
Yes. And the final version that we send on will be not materially different. Yes.
We're approving well, they might be materially different,
Well, they might be.
If they
In
are
which case, that will
Yes. And so we've been given a set of accounts currently, which our external auditors have not completed their audit on. So we do not have advice categorically that these accounts have been fully audited. So I don't think that does put us in a position to approve them.
Professional advice is that it does.
Can I just maybe clarify? However, because we're adding a rider to this, which says that we are delegating the sign-off of the final accounts, and we have control over that in its materiality, because if there are material changes, it will come back to us. But if there aren't, then we are delegating that, and because of that rider, we are approving, subject to that rider that we're adding.
What Simba just said.
Well, I think it is.
That's what I said.
You said we were approving these.
Subject to.
Okay, so the question is that the audit committee has the responsibility for approving the statement of accounts. In this meeting, we have these accounts, and what the committee needs to do is to approve these accounts subject to. That's because if you don't approve them today, you are delegating the full approval to the chair, and whereas what you need to delegate to the chair is to do the sign off. But if there are material changes to the accounts, then they bring them back here. It becomes better. Otherwise, if you do not approve them this way, you are delegating the full approval. You are almost like you are rejecting the statement of account and then say, Chair in section 151 approve them, or you say bring them back. But I think the proviso that if there are material changes, then it comes back. I think it's a fair one. My recommendation is for the audit committee to approve and then instate that proviso.
So I'll have another go. Right. So the recommendation is to approve the statement of accounts which are in front of us, and to delegate the final sign-off of the final accounts subject to any non-material changes to myself and to the section 151 officer. Yes. Great, that's what we're going to do. Would anyone like to second that recommendation, Tom?
Before we lose that thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And all in favour of that recommendation, please vote. Thank you. Okay. All in disagreement, or against that proposal? Thank you, Nick. And all abstentions. And the independent members not voting. Brilliant. Thank you, everyone, and thank you to our advisors. Last question. You mentioned letter of representation. Does that need a specific recommendation?
Yes, so the letter of representation just sets out that made by those charged with governance, which is signed by myself and the Section 151 officer, that the council has made all of those appropriate representations to us and also that the unadjusted items, which are included within there as an appendix, that you are satisfied that those unadjusted items should not be processed in the accounts.
So that's an existing delegation, not a recommendation to of the committee today to delegate that to sign that off.
Again, yes. It's,
Sorry.
yeah, it'll be the council approving the delegation.
So the committee needs to vote to do that today.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So the committee is asked to delegate the responsibility to sign off the letter of representation.
Yeah.
To
And
myself.
again, because they can note that, and then noting the concept and delegate responsibility to you.
Can you point to a page in the information that we've been provided?
Yes. I think it's right at the very bottom. So page 259. So at the very end of the statement of accounts.
Yeah.
So if it helps members, the only additional, this is a standard letter of representation we bring every year. We have put an additional disclosure in there just in relation to the equal pay contingent liability.
And the point is we're not signing that today,
No.
but you're
Shall we sign
showing us
same,
that version.
at the same point that we're, yeah.
So the committee is being asked to delegate authority to sign the letter of representation to myself as executive more vote officer.
Not according to the letter. It says that this letter was approved by the Audit Committee on the 25th of November. No year, notable.
But not signed.
Okay.
Approved assumptions. Assumption, this is definitely
But that isn't exactly the situation. So I think that is the recommendation. I think you're being asked to approve the content of the letter, but to delegate the signature of that final letter to myself as executive more vote officer. I think that's what we're being asked to do. And we should probably make sure on future agendas that that's identified as the specific decision. Good. I think that we're being asked to do that. Would anyone like to second that recommendation? John? Thank you. All in favour? All against? And abstention? Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So that's I think we get, sorry, Tim.
Just to say, Councillor Blenkin's office had to go, but he was delighted to be able to sign off the account subject.
We are still for it. That's we can do what we want. That's fine. Thank you. Thank you for unfolding. So I'm very mindful that it's 3:30, and therefore theoretically halfway through the meeting. Would members like to continue, or would like to have a short break? Short break? 5 minutes? Let's do that. So we will come back at 3:37. Thank you, Dan. So we are forward again. Brilliant. So we are back with the rest of our agenda, and we start with our latest Treasury Management mid-year report. Doesn't seem like terribly long ago we had our last one. There we are. So is that coming from you, Andy?
Sure.
Oh, it's John here. Perfect.
I'm John Clayton. I'm the Finance Business Partner covering Capital, Treasury and Tax. So today I bring to you the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for 25-26. So this is one of 3 regulatory reports. The other being the Treasury Management Structure that gets approved in February, and the Treasury Management Item Report, which you've just seen in terms of the annual report. So this report, there's it's notes only, there's no recommendations within this report. There are no policy changes, are structured or the approved indicators that were agreed by full council in February. I will set out that the council has complied with all the various codes, including the Treasury Code and the investment guidance provided by central government. The key points of the report, so the actual borrowing requirement for the year for 26-27 was set out in the report for the strategy was £235 million, and that was primarily in relation to support the general fund, capital programme and new build programmes within the HRA. The first half of the year we've currently borrowed £75 million, and we're planning on borrowing a further £125 million the remaining of the year, taking the borrowing to £200 million. And this will ensure that we've got funding available to support the capital programme and resources available to meet any of our ongoing obligations. All such borrowing costs are included in the capital financing budget, which supports the revenue cost of the council. As set out in the report, it's quite high level. It sets out that the actual capital programme has reduced during the year, and that's been reported in the Strategy and Resources Committee reports, obviously during the year as well. So in terms of how we perform, so currently our borrowing, so we borrowed £75 million, and that's at an average rate, a weighted average rate of 4.3%. And the nearest benchmark is the PDLB rate, and that's currently 4.75%. For investments, we borrowed short term at 4.275%, that's our actual returns, compared to our benchmark of 4.18%. In terms of the other key aspects in the report, we did undertake some checklist scheduling during the year, as supported by our treasury management advisors. So we refinanced one of our loans at Barclays Loans with Phoenix Life, reducing the interest rate from 3.85% to 2.74%. That was basically we reduced the actual term of that loan from 41 years to around about 12 years. We've also issued our first municipal bond. We issued 1.5 million. So that's for residents to invest directly in our climate change projects. So the interest rate on this loan is set at below our PW comparable rate, demonstrating value for money. The main of the report looks at various potential indicators, the code, the economic forecasts, which are just related. So I'll pause there for any questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, Nick? Thanks. Yeah, thank you for the KPIs. It's good to hear that we borrow money more cheaply than the market, and we have credit interest that is higher than the market. So that is a success. Comparing the two, though, we borrow money more expensively than we have credit interest on our investments, by only 0.1%. But that question is, why do we have investments at all if we effectively lose money on them by having a debt on the other side of the ledger?
Yeah, so we try and manage to manage our liquidity, we need to keep investment balances, and the median time to actually borrow funding is, in some respects, 5 or 6 days. So we do need to keep money in our back pocket to pay for day-to-day obligations. So that's the reason why we need to hold cash. So we tend to defer borrowing as long as possible. So obviously avoid those that cost of carry, although it is small. That's the main reason we do that, is to ensure we've got cash to actually meet our daily obligations as they come due.
So our cash balances are actually very low then.
So our cash balances tend to, at the start of the financial year, increase because you've got a lot of grant income. But when towards the end of the financial year, they will drop off significantly when capital tax payments reduce in the months of February and March.
And can I ask, related to that, do we consider the council's other investments, so our commercial property portfolio, against the cost of borrowing as well?
This paper purely looks at our treasury management investments and debt, not the investments in some of our commercial trade escape or our service investments within our local subsidiaries.
Does anyone consider whether it would be better to simply sell off a commercial investment rather than take out a loan?
Chair, is that okay if I put on this points? You have a disposal programme, so it goes into our capital programme. In terms of financing that programme, there's 45 million is the disposals target that is a financing source into our programme. So we have a programme looking at, and that's every asset subject to review to ensure that the income generated off that asset doesn't exceed the cost of debt, because otherwise it's a good income generating asset, and if it's lower, then it's considered for disposal.
Thanks. Any other questions? Tim?
Yeah, just got a question about the table on page 41, which shows the different interest rates for public works, landlord, market, long-term market fixed. I was always under the impression that PWLB would be the lower, was the preferable rate, but the market rates there seem to be better. So why is that?
So those market loans were predominantly taken out many years ago, whereas the actual people loans, obviously a lot of them were taken out years ago, but a lot of them have been refinanced over time.
Right.
So that is why the interest rate is higher for those people loans rather than.
So they were taken out long term when the rates were lower,
yes.
And the PWLB is still a better rate than if we would take out the same loan in the market today.
So when we actually take out long-term borrowing, we would do an options appraisal, but look at all the sources of finance available to the council before actually locking in that long-term debt. So currently at the moment we're primarily focused on short-term debt because we're expecting interest rates to fall over the coming years, and that's not an area where the market is looking into actually pricing. So you need to look at longer term durations for market debt, which is not available at the moment because we're looking to keep it short term.
David?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to talk about paragraph 25 of the report about debt rescheduling. There was a £10 million market loan issued by Barclays Bank was sold to Phoenix Life. Can I ask what the £10 million loan was for, or was it just a general?
Yeah, so when we take out loans for the council, they're not linked to any particular asset. They're purely to finance, borrow purely for trade management purposes.
Okay. So I know we have an ethical investment policy, but do we have an ethical debt policy in terms of who we actually get loans from? And has any checks been done about Phoenix Life and what they do with our money?
So when we do carry out ethical reviews of organisations as and when, and the ESGs was looked at when Phoenix Life was entered into and she was approved, and if anything they were no different or probably better than what Barclays would be assumed to be.
Yeah, Barclays probably would be wouldn't be my top choice of their money lenders, I must admit. But is there a score for Phoenix Life?
There's no such scoring as of yet. We just ensure that they've got ethical policies in place to support,
because they do have, looking at their investments partners, they have people like Aberdeen, Janus Henderson, BlackRock, Invesco, Bailey Gifford, Jupiter, MFS, Schroders, SLC, whoever they are. I don't know about their ethical investment policies.
Yeah, it's very difficult to actually review any indirect.
So we can't give our council members an assurance that our money is going to ethical investment. They could be investing that money in arms, for instance.
Potentially, yes. But what we do is we look at where
they're giving the money to us.
But we're paying them.
Yeah, but we're paying their own interest on that money, so that's excess money that could be invested in arms.
Can I ask a question?
I think Nick had it. I asked my question. Okay, sorry, Jonathan.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, John. The analysis of debt and investments, sort of item 12 in the paper. I can see that, looking at the forecast, as at March 2026, I can see that it's planned to repay some of the existing debts, which presumably is reaching maturity by the end of this financial year. And there's also planned borrowing shown in there of 248 million. So that presumably is a mixture of new borrowing to pay for capital and refinancing existing borrowing. Do you have a view on whether all of that will be short term, or if it will be a mixture of short term and long term, and what the source of that borrowing will be? Will it all be drawn down from the PWLB, or are you looking at other sources for that as well?
Yeah, so as already mentioned, so we've currently got a policy of keeping our borrowing short, so that's anywhere between a few months out for a couple of years. Now, the choice of borrowers at the moment that can support this would be either the PWLB or other local authorities. So we'll be using that type of mix of funding to support borrowing of this £240 million over the next 6 months.
If it's other local authorities, then presumably it would be relatively short term anyway. I guess that long term would be drawn from the PWLB.
So some local authorities are long out for longer durations. So it's not unusual for local authorities to lend out actually up to 5 years.
Right.
So we would obviously price accordingly off PWLB in a benchmark. And using all total all-in costs to determine which is the most efficient sort of funding to support the council.
Fine. Thank you.
Sure.
Just briefly, Chair, thank you. Are you able to confirm for us the external advisors you use?
I'm happy to share them, yes. So
who is that?
We currently use a company, been recently taken over, but it's MUFG, which is a part of a Japanese bank. So they're very big advisors, but there's only 2 sets of treasury advisors within the local authority market, one being this company and another being Arlene Close.
Yes, fair enough. Because I was just thinking there from Councillor Wilcox's question, might they be able to advise on a more rigorous approach towards the ethical question, perhaps?
So it's an emerging market. So as it becomes more customary within the marketplace, we'll get more information on these factors that's surrounding ethical standards and ethical policies, etc.
Yes, but I mean, a lot of particularly public sector organisations now are seeking, to make sure that they only get involved in both in ethical, both borrowing and investing. So I think there's certainly information there and advice, and I just wondered if perhaps your advisors could provide that and help make the decisions.
They help us support decisions going forward. We're looking for new counterparties, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But we would also do our own due diligence as well on that. But they do help support us, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say MBFG?
MUFG.
Right, thank you. So the recommendation is to note this report and send it on to full council for further consideration. So I assume we're happy to do that. Good. Thank you very much. So the next item is the update to the local code of corporate governance, and members will note that the previous one was sent as a supplementary publication so that you can see the changes from the previous version. I believe it's scenarios that recommending this report, or speaking to the report. You.
Tim's going to support me with this as well. So I'm Christina Jones. I'm the interim head of legal services and the team manager commissioner for legal services. So we're bringing an updated version of the Code of Corporate Governance to you. This year. So this is an annual review. It sets out basically how the council's governance arrangements meet the 7 core principles and the 6 approach, which are set out in the report. And just, you've got it in your pack, but just to set out the specific changes that we've made. We've added in sections on the audit committee specific role, also included member officer relations and more detail around our external partnerships too. Appendix A has been updated to include things like our new boards, the workforce board, budget and assurance, audit and risk, and there's also a governance structures and responsibility section. So nothing hugely significant in terms of changes, but adding more detail in terms of the governance arrangements that we've got in place. And the plan will be to take this before council to note if the committee's happy to approve it. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
Okay. So, do you have any questions on this updated code?
Not directly on the code in terms of how we manage our committee. I think where we have a new document that builds on an old document, it is possible to compare those two, and there's a fairly well-established practice of putting a strike through words which are removed and putting an underline words which are added, and that is a very good way of demonstrating what has changed to reviewers, and that would be appreciated for future reports to this committee.
It is easier to understand when that's been done.
Yes, it is. And I've asked for it 3 times in the last few months, and it has never arrived in that manner.
So, any questions on the substance of the code? No? Okay. So, are we happy to approve and recommend as recommended for council as suggested? So, all in favour? All against? And any abstentions? Don't put your hand up at the wrong point. I believe it's carried unanimously. I think it's enough. Great. So, the next item is a report on subject access request and freedom of information. So this is a position statement, that's the right phrase, for the council plans and improvement plans in this area. Is this coming from you, Tim?
Ben, you can
Ben.
introduce the report.
Yeah, that's fine. So, thanks, Chair. So, Ben Hugin, Head of Information Governance. So, this report highlights the arrangements that the Council has in place to respond to the enforcement notices relating to freedom of information and subject access requests and the action that the Council is taking to improve our performance. So, there are 2 enforcement notices issued by the Information Commissioner's Office, one relating to freedom of information, specifically around performance and backlog, and the second relates to subject access requests and the current backlog that the Council has in this area. The actions from the FOI enforcement notice have now been complied with in full. ICO have confirmed as much with us. The subject access request enforcement notice is focused on a backlog of cases that are sat within my disclosures team that relate to social care cases and a small number of HR cases. So you'll see in the report a fair bit of detail on things we're doing and some figures, both at the time that the enforcement notice was issued and current updated figures. But just to say, so current figures as of Friday, they're still continuing to go down, which is positive. So for 2024, there's 50 cases, and for 2025, there's 51 cases. So you'll see that's a further decrease from when I wrote this report a couple of weeks ago. There's also some information around a number of procedural changes that have been made. So there will be process of access requests in line with point 6 of the subject access request notice, and I'm sending weekly progress reports to the Information Commissioner's Office in line with point 4 of the subject access request enforcement notice. And finally, just say that there is an action plan, which is also included in our appendices, that has been published on our website both for subject access requests and for so happy to take questions.
So, are there any questions on this report? Joe?
It's not a question actually, Ben, it's more a comment and just a suggestion about something. I mean, I think it's alarming the way that these requests are increasing. these numbers are frightening, almost. And so you know, you talk about the resources that you're bringing in maybe 2 officers, is it, for 12 months fixed term contracts. What's going to happen after that, you know? I mean, this seems to be a real problem area as regards increasing demand for something service with limited resources. So I think that's something that we need to recognise, and how can that, you know, maybe you want to comment on that, but a further comment I'd like to make is there some way that we can help support maybe, you know, the resolution of this problem, and help, maybe it's happened already, you know, I don't know, the communications with the Commissioner about our progress with this, and about our response, and about the fact that, you know, we have received an internal audit report on the disclosures team. Remember that report? I'm sure you do. So that, you know, we are kind of engaged, we're aware of this issue and this problem. But I suppose what I'm asking is there some way that we can maybe help slightly more explicitly than we're doing at the moment?
I think I'll just comment on the rising figures. That's helpful. So I think, yes, it's an important extra resource to combat the rising figures, but also that coupled with the backlog is where kind of the real challenges at the moment. The process changes we've also implemented will help us, once that backlog is cleared, going forward, and then the hope then is that will then balance out those rising figures. We are also looking at next financial year doing another review of the disclosure service and how that functions in terms of the areas that we support in a centralised manner. So again, that's another thing we're looking at long term as a way of kind of keeping an eye on those rising figures.
Just in response to that, so are you saying that once the backlog is cleared, I'm just aware that you've got this resource for a really fixed amount of time. Do you predict, I mean it's difficult, isn't it, because we don't know what people are going to do, but if those contracts come to an end, you are then back to square one with your team. Do you feel that that resource is going to cope with what's going to come in, or do you think we're going to need to sort of look at that?
So I think that's why we've done the fixed term position, so when that kind of contract's come to an end, we can kind of reassess the position to where we are as to whether those resources need to be extended or not. And again, coupled with that kind of review of the whole service that I was talking about, where we look at then actually do we look to keep those on in the permanent capacity and take on some other services from the council, for example, and kind of look at that slightly more holistically rather than just at the moment it's the backlog and the current requests. Whereas obviously in the future we need to look at a big picture.
Thanks. I'll just build on what Joe has said actually. I think that it's not simply a case of chasing the numbers, but considering what we can do differently as a council to reduce the number of requests going in. So it's, I think, very helpful to start identifying patterns, which is what some of this report did. Identifying that there are lots of subject access requests relating to I assume council tenancies and quality of housing, and that is as a result of I guess the Housing Ombudsman's judgment.
Correct.
And so that's an example of where one bit of the council has affected another part. Now, can we work backwards, identify the patterns in the FOIs and the SARs? It's obviously a lagging indicator, and then go back and say, well, what were the key issues that were going wrong for us? I think that would be a better way of, firstly, improving the public service, and it would also reduce, one would hope in the future, the number of FOIs and SARs that we receive. Joe also mentioned the internal audit report on the disclosures team, which did not disclose at the time that we had been appealing an ICO judgment. So we've got to be honest to ourselves as well. You can see how the public get a little bit upset about this when even the audit committee isn't informed about things at a time that is not relevant to the agenda item. So can you talk to me a little bit about themes and how it's possible that those themes could feed back into the services.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So there's two things we're looking at there. So from a subject access request perspective, we're trying to work with our social care services around, can they engage with people, because that's where we get a lot of our subject access requests from social care. Can we engage with those individuals to provide them with information as part of that arrangement so that they don't have to request it as a subject access request. So we're trying to do that with our social work teams. And then from an FOI perspective, we're also then trying to look at what information can we proactively publish so that the public are then able to go and self-serve on that information. So, but again, at the moment it's balancing out with the resources I've got within the central team. So it's a bit of a juggling act, but that is again something we are looking at and the aim we are aiming for.
So we had an answer to a public forum question today. The question was, why don't you publish statistics about FOIs? The answer was, we do publish stats about FOIs. And saying where they were published would have been a more helpful answer. Not a strict yes-no answer, as we were given, but actually giving that extra little bit of information would then produce the follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's funny. In answer to that public forum question, I have kind of provided the request information. We are going to look to publish that extra information going forward around those that are disclosed part and in full as well. So it's in the public forum question, but again, we'll look to add it to those stats on the website from Q3, which should be January.
There was a statement on SARs. A member of the public said that they had requested information under a subject access request, but the council holds so much information on that person that it would be disproportionate for us to release it to them. But was her statement a misrepresentation of what had happened?
So I'm not aware of that example, but I'm happy to take it away and look at it. I'm not in a position to comment on.
It just doesn't feel like how the system is supposed to work. We're supposed to give people information on themselves that we hold. In fact, we hold a lot of it. It shouldn't be a reason for not sharing it, right?
So yeah, I'm happy to take that on and look at it.
Yeah, it's in the public forum. And there was one more thing which was raised in the public statement, saying that there are potentially proprietary retrieval tools available to us so as we do this faster and more effectively. Is that something that we do or investigate?
So you use it, again, in the public forum response that I provided. We don't use the command line search tool but we do have Microsoft e-discovery, which is something that we do allow certain officers to use, but again it has to be used in a particular way because of how powerful a search tool it is, but we can't just have all officers using that tool, so it is limited to those officers that are dealing with the really complex cases to retrieve the information that we need.
Sorry.
I think it was
I'll let Joe come in.
Sure, thank you. I mean, is this a problem or an area that could benefit from, like a task group or something like that? A task and finish group, to give it some kind of special attention, so that the inevitable, when those two people leave, we don't know that you'll be up to speed with your changes and that they'll all be effective and that your resources will be sufficient. And so would it not be wise to take more proactive and maybe a more team effort, maybe across council or something like that, some kind of group approach to help with this?
I think we're all nervous about what happens next. And you're doing the right things now in terms of responding to the backlog, and you actually are off this backlog.
Yes.
But I think it is a good question to see what's the next stage in terms of resourcing the ongoing basis. I think Tim will comment.
Chair, if I could comment on that, because it's one of the things that we're seeing that we need to focus across the council, as Joe has said, and improving our performance, not just in this area, but looking at things that have been raised with us around complaints, member inquiries, councillor inquiries, MP inquiries. We had a conversation with our corporate leadership team this morning that Ben and Andy would have been in, and we know that there are areas of where we need to improve our performance, of which this is one. We have a number of corporate management boards in place where we are routinely reporting and having oversight of the work that needs to be done across the council. There are pockets where there are things that can be approved. It's not across the board, but we do know that there are targeted interventions that we need to make from a management perspective, and that is something that we are routinely talking about, discussing.
So in terms of how that comes back to us?
So I think in terms of how that comes back to you, I think for now, I would recommend that we report back to you in March, given that we need to have satisfied the Information Commissioner's office by April, I think it is, Ben, in terms of the enforcement data, so that you receive assurance from us that we have progressed things as set out in the action plan. I think that would be, that's 4 months from now, isn't it? So I think that would be an appropriate check-in point with this committee to certainly provide you with an update, and we will then at that point, I suspect, have been able to look a bit further ahead in terms of what resourcing and the plans will be into the next financial year. So we can certainly look to brief the committee in that regard at that point in time.
Okay. Any more comments before we move on? Conscious there's lots of actual internal audit that we need to look at. Okay, David and Jonathan, and then we will move on.
Thank you, Chair. What do you regard as your canonical list of outstanding FOIs? Because I'm looking on what do they know. Spent about 2 or 3 minutes trawling back to 2020-22, and there are requests there saying, well, your request was received on the 31st of May 2022, and you aim to respond within 20 working days, and there's nothing there. This is the public perception of FOIs in Bristol. So how are we going to deal with that backlog to make sure that this is actually good?
So obviously we don't use what they know to track our cases. That's a way for people to send them in. We use our...
But you've replied. Somebody in Bristol City Council has replied to this FOI saying we're looking into it, and it's just gone blank.
So that would be the automated response that they get from our casework system, which is what we use similar to the member inquiries to track and deal with all of our FOI casework. So the figures we're reporting on are the ones that are sat within our casework, because we don't only receive FOIs from what they know, we receive them directly as well. So we use the casework system as our kind of record. But I do get your point around, obviously, what they know is a public facing.
So I know that casework has been looked at in terms of getting a new tool.
From member inquiries,
yes. Is the FOI caseload still going to be used by casework?
Yes, that is the current plan.
Is it fit for purpose?
For FOI and subject to discretion, I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, yeah. So as far as freedom of information requests are concerned, in December 2023, the ICO said that they were happy with the progress made. Then in March 2024, they said that there had been no improvement since the practice recommendation was issued. That, to me, appears to be a sort of inconsistent message. And I wonder what conversations you've had with the ICO around that.
So I won't go into the details around the appeal, things like that. No, that's something that we've been through. But the point around the December notice was around our practice recommendation, which focused on our timeliness, so our performance on answering cases within 20 working days. The thing that they came with us in March was around the backlog of FOIs, and that was the kind of the grounds around the appeal, which is you can all see the outcome of that. But that was where the difference was. So it was, they were saying they were happy with it in one sense, and then in March they said they were not happy in a different sense. That's where the two different items.
Right.
Okay, so I think we note the report, and we look forward to a future report in March. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So we now move to the internal audit exception reports. So all of these. First one is on officer decision reports.
Yes, where would you like us to sit?
There. I think Phil is the officer who goes just wait for colleagues to sit down.
Sorry.
So we'll start with this and then we'll see your comments.
Thank you, Chair. Bill Eames, Internal Audit Manager. I oversaw all the audits that we're talking about today. First one is the officer decision notices. This comes about where a decision is made by an officer with delegated authority from policy committees. So it's typically a key decision or a policy decision itself. The requirement through the Constitution for the decision to be published on the Council's website. Although the overall accountability is overseen by Legal and Democratic Services, this is a corporate audit and the decisions themselves originate in all of the directorates. So all of the directorates do have a responsibility in terms of notifying and bringing forward these decisions for publication. So we looked at a number of the recent decisions that have been published, looked at the processes through. There is council guidance in terms of how these decisions would be brought forward and published. Where it was, we found there were no particular issues with the type of decisions that were being taken. Then there were a number of delays in the process and late publications. So we produced, as always, our audit report on this, shared it with colleagues. Colleagues have responded. The main issues we identified are set out in the action plan, together with colleagues' original responses and an update which colleagues from the service, Tim and Sarah and Lucia, are here to respond to.
Okay. Thank you. And so thank you for coming. Thank you for your comments. And the end of January is an important date, isn't it, in terms of the recommendations that you have. So if you could comment on the work you're currently doing to meet those recommendations.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, just as I say, apologies, members, that we are obviously here to update on the limited assurance report for officer decision notices. And I do want to really reassure you that there is work already underway to address the issues that they identified. The review did highlight that, which Bill's already mentioned, that whilst the fundamental processes for recording and approving the decisions were robust, there are obviously clear opportunities for us to strengthen the approach, and particularly around the timeliness and the documentation. The issue with timeliness, there were delays in them being submitted and publishing the officer decision notices. So the administrative aspect of actually submitting them, receiving them from the officers and then submitting them onto the Modern Gov website was not always completed as quickly as the Constitution requires, and that was due to a number of reasons, one of which being the staff absences. Another one was about the documentation. In a few cases, we were unable to provide all of the necessary approval evidence when requested. That was around access issues for where the documents were stored. In some cases, it was particularly in one directorate, Adults and Communities, and that was around team absence, about where the approval documents were stored. And the escalation was also another issue that was raised, and the process for escalating the late applications to the monitoring officer is not required, so that shouldn't have been in the guidance, so the guidance is being refreshed to reflect that. So we are currently introducing an automated sign-off form, which will make it easier for officers to actually complete their officer decision notices. It will help provide guidance for how the information that they need to include. It will also provide an audit trail for the approval process. So all of the approvals will be done in a particular order through the automated form, and all of the sign-offs will be saved in one place. So it will make it a lot easier, and it will be consistently documented. We are updating the training that we provide to officers. It will be refreshed training with a renewed emphasis on the importance of adhering to deadlines and ensuring that the approvals are sought and that the completed forms are received by the executive office so we can publish them within the required amount of days set out in the Constitution. And the guidance is going to be updated, making us quite responsibilities clearer for everyone involved, and again setting out the time scales and advising officers of how they can submit the officer decision notices once we have the automated form set up.
Okay. Thank you. Can I just check one thing? You say that they will be recorded in the same in one place.
Yes.
Is that not the case now?
So each directorate, we save all of the approvals on the SharePoint site, and each directorate has their own folder. We have a spreadsheet where it's all updated. Some of the approvals are the ones noted in the audit. Some of the approvals for some of the officer decision notices, because they are currently done by email, a lot of them, or they're done by the minutes of a meeting where it was agreed. Not all of them are copied over to the folder where we went to look for the audit. So that's why that's the place they should have all been saved. So the approvals were possibly in the decision makers' emails, but they won't stay copied and saved over to the SharePoint site, which is where the gap is.
Okay. Question from members?
Thanks. I think it's really encouraging that you're coming up with a new system. A system change is what you need to run decisions through it. Normally, when something goes wrong with the council, they're a public body, you can't ascribe it to any single person. But in this instance, you can name and shame because their names are at the bottom of the decision papers, or not files. But there are specific people who are responsible for these, named individuals who are all senior enough to be making decisions, and they are not the personal assistants who are getting the revised training. It sounds like there's an opportunity here to link someone's annual objectives to getting their decision notices processed properly. Is there any kind of personal accountability involved as an answer to failing an audit here?
I think this is a question for Tim and Laura, if that's okay.
Yeah, we've got senior people here. I'm happy to hear from them.
So in short, Councillor Coombes, the responsibility for the ensuring that these decisions are published does rest with the individual directors and executive directors. So I would expect in the same way that other senior management responsibilities are discharged, that they are held accountable, and when this report was reported through to our corporate leadership team, or I think it came to the audit and risk board, apologies, there's the relevant individuals there committed to ensuring that the actions that sit with executive directors and directors will be discharged, and we will be encouraging them. Sarah won't be to avail themselves of the training that's available. So, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. So when an officer makes a decision, I'm assuming there is some sort of monetary value associated with that decision, and they get the okay to spend money. How was the money allocated without a cheque being done that the sign-off wasn't correct?
Major. In most incidences, it's the officer's decision that's acting under delegations given already. So basically a committee report itself would put if it's a capital approval, for example, you'd put the capital budget in place with that approval, then the ODN officer's decision notice is executing that decision. So this is more about a process and timing issue that's been identified by the audit rather than a kind of a financial governance challenge.
So there's no cheque to say there is X thousand pounds allocated to this decision, it's been spent correctly?
It will be checked. So the ODN will be checked against the actual delegation, so the key decision.
But that's the ODN checking itself, as opposed to somebody in accounts saying there is money allocated to this job.
No, the finance business partner in my finance function will check the budget as part and in their support to the decision author.
If I just may compliment what Andy said, that there will be financial and legal checks as part of the approval process to support the director or executive director in making the decision, which is then recorded in the Office of Decision Notice. So part of the due diligence will always be to ensure that the right financial delegations are in place, and that will be checked by finance and legal colleagues.
So in more background to that question, was this issue picked up by finance, or was it picked up by internal audit?
So the issue that this audit identified was not about the lawfulness or otherwise of the decisions that are being taken. There's no finding that delegations are being, abused, or that we're making decisions that we're not lawfully able to make. It is an administrative issue that the audit has picked up, which relates to the point after we post the Office of Decision Notice and when it gets published on our website.
So, can I comment, please, Chair? I mean, that's all understandable in a way, and I'm sure that other councillors are in a similar position to some extent on this. But then that does beg the question, why are we bothering to record the decision notices if it doesn't really matter? But of course our internal auditor is saying of course it matters, it's important. So how can we square that circle? Do you understand what I'm saying? Well, it's all very well to say, isn't it, no, there's no issue of illegality here, or there's no issue of, financial spend that isn't properly approved. It's all approved, it's all perfectly fine. But yet, we're saying the record of that decision isn't actually in place properly.
It's not recorded in the central folder in the Executive Office.
The administrative part of that decision isn't complete. And we're saying that's important. That's important, aren't we?
I agree, yes, and that's what the audit found. The audit also found that there was no issue with the delegations or any financial irregularities in terms of the decisions that were taken. So the matters that Sarah has outlined in terms of responding to the audit, I'm satisfied as the director that's responsible for the team that holds those central records, that the actions that Sarah's identified to respond to the audit are very reasonable and proportionate, and will hopefully enable us to ensure we have much more timely publication of those Office of Decision Notices.
I don't know what Joe was saying. If further decisions are published, like you wonder why they get FOIs.
Well, so I think say a little bit more. I guess from the outside, I mean, obviously you've got your processes and you are satisfied that nothing is happening that shouldn't happen. But I guess from the outside, understanding or seeing that there are flaws in an administrative process that then has implications in other ways, I think that's what we're trying to get at, is this is an administrative process, but there are implications. But at the moment it doesn't feel like that's being connected up, that those are being sort of slightly separated, and actually, to our minds, because the decision notice will then have an impact on, it could have a financial or legal or whatever impact, and if that bit isn't completely, thoroughly happening as it should do, what are the implications further down the line? I think that's what we're trying to get at. And this is probably, I understand that most of this is fine, like on the whole it's all fine and there aren't problems, but it's hard to understand how there isn't a problem, if you like. If one part of the process isn't working properly, how that doesn't impact on other parts of the process.
No, absolutely it does, because it's not just, is the document filed in the right place, it's was it published at the right time, and the people who might want to challenge that decision at post-publication or comment on that decision were able to do that within a statutory timescale.
Well,
so that's the thing that makes it.
Yeah, so that's the outward facing bit, which I think, as Nick was about to sort of say about FOI, but I guess it cast out on that internal bit as well, and that's the concern that I think they're trying to express, and obviously you're addressing it, but I think it's that reassurance perhaps that the flaws in that system are being corrected haven't had an impact further down the line. Don't know how I'm conveying that properly. I'm just trying to, yeah. Well, I think, you know, you're addressing it. I think that's the worry that we're trying to express here, rather than there are things being decided that are not right, or that they're not punished in on time. It's the other aspect of it.
Maybe if I could follow something back with Phil. There's a number of recommendations here for things to happen in quite the near future. So presumably there is a responsibility on audit to check that that's happened. And what would the committee be made aware if that hasn't happened?
Okay, so the team responded with some good deadlines. I think everything was about to be put in place by the 31st of January.
Yeah.
Sarah's update confirmed that she and her colleagues were on target for that. Once we know that the new system's in place, then we need to give a little bit of time for them to bed in, and so there's some data there for us to review. But our policy is generally to re-audit where we give limited assurance within 6 months to a year, so that we can then give hopefully a clean audit opinion that this has been properly addressed and resolved. And that's what we propose to do. So perhaps in Q2 of next year, 26-27, then we will look to do a re-audit.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
We could then obviously follow that on and confirm to the committee that hopefully everything's in place, or if not, we'll bring another report back.
Okay. Thank you. So on that basis, are we happy to note this report and move to the next one? Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I believe it is board management next. So thank you for housing colleagues for bearing with us until we get to this point in the agenda. I'm glad that we have. So Phil, all these reports are yours, aren't they?
Yes,
so
they are.
You're introducing the
So
reports.
I will briefly introduce this. Audit was undertaken in the Housing Directorate, and having effective void management processes minimises the time that properties are empty between lettings, and also ensures they're fit and ready to be let to new tenants. The council has established targets for average relet times, although in recent years those targets haven't been met. So we undertook a review in this area, looked at some of the reasons behind that, and provided limited assurance. The main findings which we produced are included in the table at the end, together with positive responses from housing colleagues, and a subsequent update of progress since the time of the review is also attended. Colleagues from housing, Sonia and Claire, are here to respond to the report.
Sonia?
Thank you very much. I'm Sonia Bursland, I'm the Interim Executive Director for Housing. My colleague Claire will get into the detail in terms of the plans and improvement actions in relation to empty homes. I'm not calling them voids because I've banned it from the lexicon, because essentially it doesn't really describe what they are. They are homes which are empty, which should be turned over, ready for the next person from the housing register. And I think it's really important that we try and make that language change within housing so that we understand the importance of this particular area of work. Having our homes empty for a long period of time means they're not available to our residents. It also means that we're losing rent, and that rental income is really critical in terms of investing in our existing homes. I just thought I'd give you a little bit of context in terms of some of the numbers. So in an average year, we get about 1,100 homes which are vacated and need to be prepared for new residents to move into. Our average end-to-end time is 83 days, which is long. However, I think there is some mitigation for that in terms of some of the general condition of the homes that we are getting back. Unlike some of our housing association partners, our homes are generally older, most of them are post-war. We have a significant number of non-traditional archetypes, some with latent defects.
And we also choose to do some planned works when the homes are empty because it minimises disruption for residents. So if the property is due at some point in the near future to have a new kitchen or a bathroom or a rewire, we will often use the point when it is empty to do that because it minimises disruption. That's something that we probably need to review because I think we need to find the balance between disruption and rent loss and the lack of availability of homes. The other thing just to note as well is that we know that our average spend is about £14,500. That's quite high. I'd say sector average. Again, I don't know it for local authorities who all the large-scale voluntary transfers who have more similar stock, but sector average is probably close to £7,000. So it gives an indication of some of the challenges and the major works and capital works which are required when our homes do become empty. In part, actually, I would say as well that generally our residents stay longer as well, so it may well be that for some of these homes it will be the first time in a significant number of years where they have become vacant and ready for relet. But I'll let Claire take you through some of the improvement actions because I think obviously it's a concern to us in terms of the limited level of assurance that the audit has identified. So just to say that they are not issues that were unknown to us.
Good afternoon, thank you Chair. Cllr Coombes, the Interim Director of Transformation and Building Safety. I'm not going to read the management progress update as of the 11th of November, but I do wish to highlight a couple of things that we have met our 31st of August 2026 timelines, with the exception of ensuring that contracts and contract suitability. We have a new IT system. It went live on the 27th of October, and that has taken us significantly far down that road about contractor competence, contractor suitability, and it will be enhanced when the next section of MEC is rolled out, which has a contractor management module. We are already able to look at a schedule of rates costs versus the received invoices. We are already able to specify jobs a little bit more accurately using the National Federation schedule of rates, and we are able to link each individual void cost to that property. The other thing I wanted to highlight to committee was we have the assets rationalisation policy, which was approved by Housing and Homes Delivery Committee, and we are looking at expensive voids in terms of asset rationalisation and investigating whether or not we should sell or whether or not we should improve. That is not a binary decision because we have a housing crisis, and sometimes the properties that are expensive to repair at void are the properties in most demand. So the asset rationalisation policy is looking at value as well as cost, and also the housing need rather than just pounds and pence. We are reporting void performance to Housing's Performance Board, and we are also able to report key to key, so the amount of time of housing management, the amount of time with works, the amount of times with letting, and we're starting to pilot visits while works are on site for prospective tenants, in particular if we're putting in a new kitchen and we can give them a choice, we give them a choice. We are looking at the cost and the benefit of doing work after somebody takes up tenancy to do the large-scale component replacements, as Sonia highlighted, but it boils down to the risk in doing the works and the risk presented by the occupant. If you've got somebody with a large family, you really don't want to do the rewire around about children. So the main progress is that we actually have much better void management information and much better automated systems information, and it is beginning to come through the system, and as we have more and more voids, we'll be able to be better at trend analysis, seeing where our blockers are, seeing whether or not we can do things differently to reduce times. So the next timescale is the end of the year, December, which is to show the next set of assurances and evidence that we've taken on board the internal audit recommendations, and we're on track to do that by the end of the calendar year.
Okay. Thank you, Claire. Can I just check something you said at the beginning? You said that you've met a number of the requirements for August 26. Does that mean that you've met them already? Or
Yes.
that you've met them already?
Yes.
Where did the date of August 26 come from?
Sorry, August 25. I beg your pardon. It's me living in the future rather than August 25.
Because there are a number of objectives here that are targeted to August 26.
KPIs, we now have monitoring systems in place, which is an August 26 target.
Right.
But until they are populated, I can't tell you whether or not we're measuring the right thing.
Okay.
So the KPIs are being monitored,
Okay.
they're collated manually.
So in progress for these timescales, but not already met.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's fine. That's what we were asked to do. It's always good to give a gold star rather than a silver star, but I wasn't sure what you were saying there. Thank you. That's really helpful. Do you colleagues have questions on this report? David.
I think Joe's
Sure.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to ask you about the item that you just referred to, number 3, which is the only actually the high area for improvement, if you like. And I just want to ask, in terms of systems, this NEC system, can you just clarify what's going on with that? That's a new system, I take it, is it? And what has happened with Civica CX? Is that still being used? Because the audit identified that there isn't a full record on there in order to avoid excessive costs.
So we've moved from CX to NEC.
Okay.
And the system has significantly better functionality. We did start to do a little bit of trend analysis from CX, but unfortunately the system's limitations meant that we couldn't evidence other than the Eureka spreadsheet that is not really auditable. So NEC standard systems reports, and also we've set it up so that you have to fill in the fields. It won't actually let you close a job down unless you've filled in the fields properly.
Mm-hmm.
So we will get much better systems reports.
Sorry, just one other quick question, Chair. So you mentioned in there as well, and again, I'm not quite sure if this is August 26 or if it's happening now, that about the Housing Performance Board, that you're reporting on voids to them, to it. Have they not had this as a priority as such in the past then, or are they relatively new in their composition, or what's the story there in terms of their interest in this and responsibility?
So, if I may, Chair, Housing is a new directorate. Previously, Housing was part of the Growth and Regeneration Directorate. It became a directorate in its own right in April of this year, and I was appointed as the interim executive director. We didn't have a performance board that was focused solely on housing, so it was one of the things that we created as part of the new directorate. In addition to the challenges we have around our empty homes, you may be aware that we're judged to be a C3 service by our regulator, and we have a consumer standards programme. We also have obviously wider, broader responsibilities around homelessness and housing options. So we've created essentially a performance board, which is the directors, the executive director and the heads of service, whereby we routinely now look at our key metrics, but we also call in colleagues where we've got concerns about performance on a monthly basis, so that we can understand what's happening and what are the actions we need to take to improve performance.
That's great, thank you very much. Are we saying though that you were not expecting that to bear fruit really fully until the August 26 date?
I think so. I think it will bear fruit in terms of the level of oversight that's happening now. But I think we've set ourselves, in terms of when we'll see the benefit of that, I think we've set ourselves a target for August 26.
Right, thanks very much.
Thanks. Just while you're talking, I've done a bit of maths on the scale of this. So recently the council's agreed to buy 150 new houses. Just if we were to get our voids, empty homes, back from where they currently are to our target, that would be worth 130 houses for us, wouldn't it? So that's the scale of opportunity here. If we were to hit our own targets, it's 130 houses for free for us to use. So is there a team behind this? Project managers looking after every single house, chasing the deadlines, and
So
moving things along?
I think we have some structural challenges in terms of how we manage our empty homes. We do have a dedicated team responsible for empty homes, but it is a mix of in-house resource and external resource. Because of the limitations of our IT systems, we've really not been able to get under the skin of both our internal productivity and the value for money and the productivity in relation to our contractors. I think NEC will assist us with that, but it isn't the whole answer. I think we need to change some of the way we work. We do need to look at the programmes of work that we're delivering when homes are empty and see whether we would deliver broadly better value for money if we delivered them as part of a planned programme. I think we also need to look at our process. We've probably created quite a bit of waste demand within it. We don't use our surveying function terribly effectively. We know that we haven't been doing what we call pre-void inspections. So when somebody's moving out, the housing officer doesn't go around and do a property inspection, have a discussion with the resident around some areas of repair, which might be the resident's responsibility. These are the things that we haven't been doing that we need to do, but there are some structural changes that we need to make to the service to enable that to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Not just IT, it also needs people to drive it.
Okay. Thank you. I'm happy to note this report and move to the next one. The meeting management point. I know Claire needs to leave at 5. We're obviously not going to get to the end of our agenda by 5, but there's a number of reports that we do need to conclude, including particularly the audit priorities and the county fraud one. So I'd like to go to 5:30 if colleagues are happy with that, but please, people can't stay for a school quarter, then please leave. It's other priorities because we have the rest of our lives. Great. So the next report is also housing related. This is housing complaints. So a slightly different aspect, but in a similar field.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the council has to comply with the Housing Ombudsman Complaints Handling Code. The code was reviewed and updated fairly recently, made more stringent. The council has responded in part to that, including appointing a dedicated manager to oversee this area, which was good. We did, during our audit, though, identify some other issues, which, as before, are summarised in the table, together with the original responses and an update provided by Sonia and her colleagues.
Sonia, do you have any comments on this?
Thank you. Obviously the report is for noting, but I just thought I would, rather than go through all of the actions, I thought I'd pull out some of the key points, if that's all right. I think it's worth noting that obviously what the audit talks about is that our complaints really should manage our risk around maladministration claims from the Housing Ombudsman. And whilst the report only focuses on stage 1 complaints, it's important to note that the Housing Ombudsman is also concerned with stage 2 complaints. And regrettably, our performance in both areas falls below the standard that we would like to achieve. Stage 1 complaints are managed within the housing service, but stage 2 complaints are managed by our colleagues in the corporate complaints team. And we're working very closely with them on some of the actions which we've identified as part of our management response. By way of, again, context, just to say that I think for 24-25 we had in the region of 1,500 complaints in relation to the housing management service. And and the vast majority of those, almost 75%, were with our repair and maintenance function. And the way that we organised complaints meant that essentially there were probably circa 80 colleagues across the property service who were responding to complaints. And I think that individual approach to how we manage complaints rather than having a centralised approach has meant that we've had inconsistency in terms of how we respond. I think the outcomes for residents have been diminished as a result of that, and the quality of the responses have been a little bit lacking. I think critically one of the learnings that we've taken in terms of some of the work we have done on our complaints is that sometimes we focus too much on the who did what when, and actually what we need to do is pick up the phone, speak to the resident, understand what the concern is and how they would like us to fix it. And that really ought to be our starting point. And I think our new approach to complaints definitely reflects that and reflects best practice in relation to the housing ombudsman. What we are proposing to do in terms of the service is actually to create a centralised team who are responsible for the coordination of our complaints process, but also who ensure that we're getting trend analysis, that we understand the learning, and that we are embedding change as a result of feedback from our residents. They'll also actually have an added benefit in relation to SARS, FOIs and member and MP employees, where we also have some challenges in terms of performance. They'll also perform that general kind of coordinating function and role. We're also going to be looking at training for our colleagues, and again working really closely with our colleagues on corporate complaints as well to ensure that performance improves there. It's noted within the report that actually our performance in complaints has been consistent before. It was poor in 23-24, it was poor in 24-25, and there wasn't an action plan in place. However, there have been actions, and I'm pleased to be able to say that in Q1 this year, it's not startling performance, but our performance did improve to 56% of stage 1 dealt with in time. In Q2, that's improved to 82%. So some of the actions that we have taken early on have actually landed, and the renewed focus on complaints, which also comes to that performance board that we now have within housing, does appear to be having an impact.
Thank you. The volume reporting is definitely improved, so it's good. That's good to see. I wanted to ask a question specifically on item 6 in the recommendations, which is around ombudsman cases, because the finding is quite striking to me. As I read it, it seemed to say that 51 ombudsman cases not being reported to management, and that seems like something that should never happen, rather than. So that's sort of stunning that would be normal. So how confident are you that won't happen in future?
I think our reporting has significantly improved, and our case management functionality has also improved. There's a high degree of confidence that actually the actions that we've identified will address that.
Probably from members. Joe first.
Dave was first this time, weren't you?
Oh, thank you.
It's difficult.
That's
Two-sided.
It is. Yeah.
So we have a new IT system, Northgate NEC, whatever you want to call it today. I'm assuming that the design of that system is incorporating complaint management at its core. Is that correct?
Yeah, there will be a CRM functionality as part of that, I believe. I don't know, I'm not close enough to it, to be honest, to understand the full functionality, but I can always come back with some additional information if you'd like.
So you could have some assurance that this new IT system would actually help this process, not hinder it.
Yeah, well, we should, with a reasonable customer CRM system, you should be able to essentially log the complaint, raise it as a task, assign it to an individual, and it should prompt and also escalate when it's out of time. But I'm just not close enough to NEC in terms of how it operates. But I will see that.
Please. That should go in action, yes. I think we would expect confirmation that is happening. At the point where it's embedded enough, I know it's not a big bang, is it? There are different modules of it eventually, but if that's in place, I think we absolutely would want to know that was being used. Joe.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about your deadline, and I take into account what you've just said in terms of some wins that you've already achieved. But your deadline on item 1 there for 30th of April next year, is that realistic given the comment by the auditor in 33.1, you know, where the last sentence there says that HLS was evaluating options for an action plan to address underperformance, but implementation may take up to another year. Now, I suppose it depends on when the audit was finalised, I don't know. But is that, you're content with that deadline of 30th of April 26?
I think I am, because we have had considerable focus on this, and we've already completed the initial workshop, which with the heads of service looking at our complaint process in general. We still have some things to work out, particularly in relation to some of our high-risk areas around disrepair and damp and mould. And the other critical part of this will be if we are creating a central team, if we're taking colleagues from existing teams, that will require a consultation process. But much of the work has already started and is in progress. I think the team are telling me they're comfortable and confident about the dates.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So, colleagues, are we happy to note this report and move to the next one? Thank you very much. Thank you for in this area. Thank you for finding out the report. So the final one of these is associate care provider management. So I think Tom will begin with the management comments, but some introduction from Phil first.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, this review is about adult social care and the external provider assurance. So the council provides more than 5,500 service users with adult care support. A great deal of that provision is outsourced to external providers. Current figures, I think, are around 500 external providers in total. The council needs to get some assurance about the quality of that care, so there is a team which undertakes external reviews, assessments and so on, which are both document-based and visit-based. We undertook a review of the processes that were in place in terms of gaining that assurance for the council, but we found some good things going on. We also raised a number of issues and findings. As before, findings summarised at the table at the end, together with the initial responses and an update provided. Tom, the Director of Adult Social Care Commissioning, is here to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, Tom. Some of these comments are quite worrying.
Interesting start. I guess I provide reassurance then. All of the services in question are regulated by the CQC, who's the statutory regulator of care services. All of the individuals in these services would have annual reviews, so they'd be visited by professionals. They're in services such as care homes, so they'd be professionals in and out all the time. I think, just to slightly update on what Phil said, there's actually 2 or maybe 3 different services. There's a contract management team, which is a corporate team following the change to a corporate. So they do the performance management stuff for the statutory contracts. There's the quality team, which sits in my area, which are a team that go out sometimes proactively, often reactively, going out to see services where there are any concerns raised. And then there's strategic commissioning, which have inherited some of the contract management responsibilities when the contracts team moved corporately. I think what the audit found is, just also say the audit's really helpful because I think this work was going on at just the time I was becoming permanent in this job, and it really does set a good baseline for what we need to do. The quality team, the team in my team, are actually really good. CQC met them, found they're really good. CQC report is positive about the work we do around quality assurance. what this has shown me as a new leader of that service is that some of their practices have got out of date. So some of there's a QOF framework, quality assurance framework, that hasn't been updated since 2018. So that needs updating. Actually, it needs updating for a bigger reason, which is since the single framework and the number of providers we've got has gone from 150 to 500, we're obviously not going to be able to have the same quality regime as when we had 150, because same number of people, many more providers. So there's a lot to do. It's a really helpful baseline for us to work on. As I say, they are a good team, all very experienced, very good at what they do. We work well with the contract management team. So the two things, as I say, some of what they do is slightly out of date, and also the contracts which are not strategic. So they're not strategic because there are fewer people in them. This mentions out of area, for example. Out of area will have one person, and that's we're placing someone at distance because they've got a son that lives in Birmingham, for example, or sometimes it's a very specialist unit that you can only get one or two of based on individual needs. So that's why they weren't deemed strategic contracts, and some of what this has found is that they don't have the same monitoring as when the corporate contract management team is managing them. So there's two areas really. The improvement of the quality service is underway. We're reviewing the quality assurance framework, the monitoring and the tracking. That will be coming through our EDM because we really do need to define what our quality management regime looks like now compared to what it used to look like. As I say, different market, different scale of challenge. The wider things around how do we provide a similar level of contract management to non-strategic providers, that's got a longer timeline, and that's because we need to work that out. We've got to square the circle of not having a contracts team but having contract monitoring responsibilities. So that's something I'm talking to Andy and talking to his team about. Well, how do we resource that contract monitoring that used to be done by the adults contracts team, but we don't have an adults contracts team anymore, there's a corporate one.
Thank you. That's really good to hear. Good quality assurance makes a huge contribution to risk. So I'm really pleased to hear what you said. Sorry, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I know it's getting really late and everybody's desperate to go home, but I'm really pleased to see this on the agenda. It's something I did request. Came to us, and I don't know whether this review was a result of that or whether it was already in the pipeline, but really glad it's happened because I'm really concerned about this. And I'll declare an interest at this point. I've got a son who's in adult social care in Bristol, and he's in one of those small, presumably what you're calling uncontracted,
I've got the word myself.
Yeah.
Non-strategic contracts.
Non-strategic, so sort of
can I just
small provision.
Just on that, just to explain. So that's not an adult social care thing. That's a council-wide thing, and that's about the value of the contract and the and a set of criteria that determine whether it's strategic. In adult social care, it depends on the framework. So anything that's on the single framework is classed as strategic. Any provider that didn't join the single framework might be a non-strategic, and that's the difference. So just because it's small doesn't mean it's not strategic.
But as you mentioned yourself, the number of providers has shot up from 150 to 500. We've got the same resource to monitor what's going on in those providers, and we need to do something about that because we can't leave it all to the CQC. We have to know what is happening with all these private companies doing work on our behalf. I don't believe that we know. I think we know very little about how a lot of them are performing. And so a lot of what's in this report is about things that we need to be doing. There's not a lot about what we've done already. So I really want to sort of highlight the fact that this is really important and we need to as you say, you've just started on a journey of working this out. But I think it's a bit of a ticking time bomb for us out there if we don't know what's happening in all these small providers. Because we're bringing a lot of people back in county. in terms of sort of where I'm coming from, my son's got autism, so probably would have gone out of county once upon a time. We're trying to bring all this back in county, so we're having to find lots more providers to do that work, but we don't know what quality they're providing.
I don't want to provide reassurance that I can't provide, because I think that's a fool's game. What I would say is, in my last job, it was a smaller council, we didn't have a quality team. The commissioners had quality as part of their role, and we wanted to create a quality team. Here we've got a quality team of 8 or 9 people, someone must have counted out. So we have a quality team, and they respond. We've got these things called SNFs, which is Service Monitoring Information Form, and we proactively ask people to fill those in. So if you or someone else visiting someone else in the service, or a social worker or a health visitor or anyone else has any concerns when they visit a service, they send that in, that comes into the quality team, and that tells us that we need to reactively, go out and do a visit. So adult social care quality is always about how you use the intelligence you've got and how much intelligence. And it's absolutely true to say, if you've got a nursing home down the road with 100 people in it, we're going to get more SNFs because we're going to have more ons on it. So if it's in city, I would say there's a much better chance of us having more intelligence, because there'll be more people from our partners, Bristol partners will know to tell us better than, as I say, if someone's in Birmingham, they might not know to tell us. But equally, they should be telling Birmingham Council with any concerns they've got, and Birmingham should be keeping us informed. One of the things this found is that our relationships with other local authorities are not as formal as they might be. We've got very good relationships across the southwest because we've got staff that have been here for a very long time. Beyond that, we've got to work on that, and that's one of the recommendations and something we're working on.
Can I just say one more thing? Yeah. So I don't want to put you in a corner here, but we're at the stage of a stage 2 complaint in terms of the quality of the provision that has been going on, and at no point has anybody ever told, from the social work team or anything, told us that there is a quality team that could be looking at this. So I think there's a problem there, maybe between social work and your team.
I would be intrigued to know whether the social worker has filled in a SNF and not told you. So that would be an interesting thing to look into.
So I'll leave it there, Chair, but really important that we
completely agree
with this.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to ask about communications really, and how much of that are you seeing as an issue and having to plan to improve it, because it's the complaints process, for example, and client information that's coming into you. How are you going to improve that and gather that? And the other communications is, of course, with the providers, of which there are now so many more. And action 2 here, or item 2 regarding the service improvement plan, not really in existence in terms of its format for providers. So the culture, the provider perception, you could expect it to be pretty laissez-faire, frankly, because of some of the issues here that have been brought up. So I just wondered if you could comment maybe briefly on the communications with those different sort of groups, clients and providers.
Yeah, just to say, number 2 raised a bit of contention within my team, and we absolutely understand it. The reason that we haven't had a template, and again this is how it's worked other places I've worked, is because the provider is responsible for the provider quality improvement. That's just a given. Every organisation, it's their responsibility to improve. What we don't want is hundreds of providers in Bristol looking to us to improve for them. So the reason there's not a standard template is because they have their templates. If you're working with KUK, they've got their templates, they've got their back office, they've got their quality team. So we're going to do something to make sure there's something standard from us, but that's why. So it's not laissez-faire, it's working with the provider. The onus is on them to improve, and we're there to make sure it keeps improving. We have regular meetings, so the providers that are on the watch list have regular meetings. They'll go, so one, for example, we've had monthly meetings, one of our main providers, we've had monthly meetings, we're seeing a significant improvement, this is using the Smiths actually, and now we're going to quarterly meetings. So communication in that way I think is okay. What I would say is I want it to be more robust, and one of the things that we're just in the process of doing is setting up what I've had in other councils called a care governance board. So at the moment there's quite a lot that the quality team do, but I want a board that I chair that has all of that intelligence so that helps communicate out with partners, people like the continuing healthcare lead, designated nurse from the ICB, senior social work managers, so that we've got that board. So that's part of how we want to improve. The bit about comms is always really interesting. So we have the Smiths. The Smiths are working because we're getting a lot of them, which is both a good thing and a bad thing. It's one of those, obviously if all services were perfect you'd have none, but you know all services aren't perfect, so you want to have some. You can never tell, so the example given by Councillor Rickington here, you can never tell if you're not hearing something that's out there because the person didn't know to tell you. So what we do need to keep doing as part of this work is keep going out to all of our practitioners and explain to them and keep reminding them. You probably find, as with all organisations, social workers that have been here for a long time absolutely know what to do. Newer social workers might not have the training yet.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom. That's really helpful. Are we able to note this report? Thank you again. Thank you for bearing with us till we got to that item.
No worries, and thank you. Hopefully come back when it's all shiny and
Thank you, Phil, for all your reports this afternoon. We've got 4 reports from Timber. Is it possible to talk to items 15 and 16 together? Which is to say, would you briefly introduce the half-year report and then your priorities for the next report?
That's fine, Chair. So the half-year report, the committee is familiar with the report. We are updating you in terms of where we are. You see from the report that I'm saying we are slightly behind, and I've given the reasons for that. Because we do flexible quarterly planning, which is the Q4 report, I am comfortable in terms of what I propose that we need to deliver, that will be able to deliver sufficient work, that will enable me to provide a robust opinion at the end of the financial year. I'm also assured that we have done sufficient work that enables us to give us some intelligence around advisor work. So if you look at Appendix 1, there's a list of reviews that are called advisory. This relates to non-assurance work that we do to help management in improving control, governance and risk. So Chair, basically I'll take questions. This is what we've done, and the only thing that I want to mention is that it's there in the report, so I have to say it now. Said the Alison is retiring at the end of the financial year, and we're in the process of looking for a deputy chief internal auditor. But I can take questions from those 2 items, Chair.
And can I say, the reason why I didn't mention that earlier is because this is not your last report.
No,
this is not your last report.
March.
You are here in March.
Yes.
Do you comments on items 15 and 16? So,
a couple of
hang on, Cam first and then I'll go.
Yeah, I had a question about on 15, in paragraph 11, it mentions that that some of the reviews, so it's for building control, damp and mould, and housing contract to management reviews have been removed from the plan because a new approach has been taken. Are you able to expand on that new approach and what's going on around that at all? So that's paragraph 11 of
yes, so on paragraph 11, okay, so if you look at, we had Sona in here, because of the house at intervention, they are required to do a lot of remedial work, but they also have external inspections that are happening in that space. So if you look at, I think down the mold, the external inspection. So if there's an external inspection, there's no need for us to duplicate effort. So that's why we didn't do that.
because that's part of the customer standards.
Yes, and then but we use the assurance from that to inform the opinion.
Okay, so then how do we as councillors, how are we assured that that work's taking place? And
So when I do the annual opinion, the annual opinion is informed by the work that I do, but it's also informed by the external inspections. So any external inspections that happen in the services, we gather them through the annual governance statement process, and we use that to inform the opinion. So everything that happens, I mean, in previous years I've actually made some exceptions from external inspections. So that was put into the annual governance statement process.
Also, add from a member, we had a deep dive in the housing consumer standards at our last meeting. So I think we as a group have had quite a lot of opportunity to discuss with the housing leadership team what they're doing and what the standards we're holding them to.
They're coming in January.
They're always here.
Yeah, they're coming in January.
David.
Thank you, Chair. Page 156, paragraph 16. I'm noting that our contract with KPMG ends in January 27. Can a paper about the robust contract management arrangements that are needed for that internal audit strategic partner recruitment be actually shared with the committee, please? Because I'd be interested to see how transparent that process is.
So I think we can. I don't think it's going to be a long paper, but briefly just give you some assurance.
Yeah.
So with KPMG, we have operational managers. The operational management meeting where we have myself, Alison and Phil. We meet with KPMG, the KPMG audit partner, the senior manager, to discuss the work that we've allocated them. Then on a quarterly basis, myself and the Section 151 Finance Director, we meet with the KPMG audit partner again to just talk about strategy for that. But I can bring a summary of that. But we meet religiously. We meet monthly with them to go through the work that we've given them and where they are with the work. And it's absolutely probably more robust than other areas because we've got actually the agendas and action notes from the meetings as well.
Thank you.
Jonathan and then Joe.
Thank you. Yes, there was an audit of car parking income which was given substantial assurance. I understood that there was going to be an audit of parking services in a wider sense to cover things like bus gate enforcement. And I wondered if this audit was the audit of parking services, because it appears to be narrower than I would have expected.
Yeah, so there was two audits. So there's the audit of car parking income, and then on line 43, you've got your parking enforcement one, which shows it is in progress. I think we are now in drafting report stage on that one, aren't we?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
We will. Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Audit underway coming to completion.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. You mentioned, Simba, in your report about the grants work having increased dramatically, actually. I just wondered about, in terms of resources and pressure, therefore, do the external auditors get involved at all in certifying council's grants?
So the probably very few probably that you do, don't you probably?
Oh, sorry,
but it's different. I think the ones that we are talking about, most of them relate to the money that is received by the council, for example, from worker as well, and then from other organizations. But I think the external auditor probably will do the housing benefit and one other thing. I don't think they do
so we normally do housing benefits, teachers' pension return, and probably the housing capital receipts. Now, if you go back a few years, we used to do many. We used to do about 50 audits. But actually, the changing requirements meant that in an attempt to reduce the cost of that certification work, it was permitted for internal audit to take on those claims.
Because, yes, 'cause I just think you can't go on forever like this. I mean, what if there's more even next year?
No, there's we made a plan. So the grant audit work is chargeable, so we charge for that work.
Okay.
So what we've done is we created a post in internal for internal auditor. However, what happened was that when we went out to recruit internally, we have 2 level 7 apprentices within our team, and we appointed one of those to that post.
Yes.
Remembering that those apprentices are on a fixed term contract, so one is now moved on to a permanent post.
Okay.
However, it doesn't increase the actual. We have to go back in the market to find another auditor to get that required resource. Yes, we have a post that's vacant that we need to put in someone in there for us to be able to get the resource that is needed to cater for the grants. That work is chargeable and it's probably going long term given what we are doing with worker.
Chargeable to whom?
So the arrangement that we have is that because it's a grant requirement, when they get the money, there's a requirement for the chief internal auditor, and at times the chief internal auditor and the chief exec to sign off. That cost is already part of the grant, so it comes from the grant. Yeah, so we are not asking sales to pay, we are asking because it's a grant cost, so it comes from the grant.
So I guess your only problem then tends to be the time lag in getting resource replaced or getting new resource to do the work.
Yeah, but I'm sure when we get to next year, probably we'll be in a better place because we now know that it's probably the increase in the number of grants. I think will probably continue.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, colleagues, can I ask if we're content with pages 15 and 16? So, page 17, the half-year fraud report, is 2 things. So it is both the update on current fraud work, but also there is a revised fraud policy. And there was a second publication to have the previous fraud policy, so you can see the one that it replaces.
Yes, and I apologize. I think the tracking could have worked, but I think that policy has changed in terms of it would have made no sense to do track changes on that because we moved things so much to ensure that the policy was clear and also focusing on prevention. We really want to focus on prevention because prevention will help us to reduce the cost of investigating and even the difficulty of recovering even the money. So the focus is on prevention. But the other thing that we would also wanted you to consider is some of the good work or some of the good outcomes coming from the fraud work. Some of the work is so tangible, like the 15 positive housing outcomes from that work. It continues to be challenging, but I think there's some good work happening there. Louise is here; she can.
So could you give us hypothetically an example? What is a good housing outcome? What does that mean?
Well, I would like to say that actually a good outcome is not finding any fraud. In terms of the housing outcome, we have a property that would be regained, so it's been maybe illegally sublet and we've repossessed the property. It could be also a cancelled fraudulent housing application or a cancelled fraudulent right to buy application. That's the 3 most common housing outcomes.
So the 15 could be anything.
It could be any of those, yes. Yes.
A housing reclaimed because the wrong person is living in it, or a fraudulent application for right to buy or something of that nature.
Yes, we can provide more detailed breakdown if that's...
But I just thought it was useful for colleagues to know what is meant by outcome.
Yes, indeed.
Colleagues, questions on the fraud report and the updated fraud policy?
Sorry.
So Joe first and then
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to go straight to the strategy. What are we calling it, a strategy? I think so. The fraud strategy on page 192. You'll think I'm obsessed with this resources question, but I mean, you know, further enhancements there. There's a lot of stuff there, a lot of things. And again, you know, it's a question of what resources are going to have to change maybe, or be increased in order to achieve that. And in fact, I think, is this a 3-year strategy or not?
We reviewed this on a 2-yearly basis, so with 2, but we will report
2 years.
Yeah, we will report the progress during the annual report that we bring to you in May.
It's just that there's not really any timelines in it either, which I find a bit strange. But, you know, I accept that it's got a lot of very good things in it. It's extremely comprehensive, and I like, obviously I recognise your the way you structured it, etc. But my questions would just be about that, resources for this, delivery of this, and timelines. Milestone, do you think?
I think it is deliberate from timelines, because the work that we do at times can be, this work would be impacted by the reactive work, that if we've got many investigations to do, it means that I'll put all the resources to clear the investigations. But when we are light on investigation, then we can do some of the proactive work which is covered in this strategy. But you would also see that within the Q4 priorities, there are also things that we have taken from the strategy that we'll be focusing on in Q4. So each time that we bring in priorities to the audit committee, we also indicate some of the fraud initiatives that we need to do coming from and at the end of the year, we'll give an update in terms of where we are. But beyond this, we also have an implementation plan which lists all some of the things that we need to do, which forms our proactive kind of
plan, sorry?
We have got a proactive fraud plan, which is purely focusing on prevention.
Right. Thanks. Thanks.
Yep, just a tiny thing. Delighted to discover a typo at the contents page. The final section is on page 16, not 166.
Sorry. Too many reports, apologies, should have picked that.
And on that note, I think there's a lot of documents flying around at this point, but in the internal audit charter it mentions the mayor role and publishing the leader. Is that all?
The old one, probably.
Am I looking at the right thing? I'm aware.
No, you're moving on to 18, I think.
We haven't got to the quality management, the quality assurance.
Oh, sorry, am I jumping ahead?
Hold that thought.
Yeah, 18.
Well, I'm going to have to go, so I'm going to leave you that thought. And mayor was also mentioned in the Treasury Management Report, page 49 as well. But I've got 3 hours of lectures to get to, so
Thank you. Good.
I'll leave that.
So, are we happy to approve the half-year fraud report and the revised fraud policy? Yes. Thank you.
And the priorities as well. And the priorities.
Yes. Yes.
It's a separate report.
Yes. Yeah.
So 15, 16 and 17.
Yeah, no,
15, 16.
We've done 15 and 16 already.
Oh.
17 is this. Brilliant, thank you. So the last report, if we can bear it, the internal audit quality assurance approval. Do you want to introduce either of you what this report is for?
Yeah, that's okay, Chair. So this report is purely about the management of the internal audit service, its governance. So that's purely the way it talks about what we do in delivering this service. So this is important for the audit committee to be assured that we have the right arrangements in place that will enable us to comply with the global internal audit standards. So what is covered by Agenda Item 18 is to do with us complying with the global internal audit standards, which regulates how we undertake internal audit activities. That's absolutely what this is about. So Appendix 1, which is the Foundation Improvement Program, it just talks about the arrangement that we have in place for making sure that we have a robust internal audit service. It makes reference to a lot of things like the internal audit charter, which is the document that states how internal audit is governed, our reporting lines, our independence, our relationship with the audit committee and management. And it also talks about our mandate where do we get our mandate from? It's now, those are some of the additions to the chart, but we've seen this before. The internal audit strategy, which is a document that actually details how we actually undertake the work to meet our mandate. It clearly states how we plan the work, what improvements we need to do, and then at the end it also identifies some of the risks that we face. So just how do we get into a position where we are comfortable that we've got an effective and working internal audit service. And then the last, which is Appendix A. The Appendix A, you remember last time we did indicate that there are global internal audit standards that became effective 1st of April 2025. You remember in some briefing we took you through some of the changes and some of the responsibilities. But what we've done is we've done a self-assessment against those standards, and we've given you the high level, our own assessment, and we've also identified some of the enhancements that we need to make sure that we comply. We have been very, very open and pragmatic about this. We are not perfect. I think we are open to continuous improvement. That's why we've identified those things that we need to improve. Those are listed within Appendix A. I'll take any questions from, whatever you want to ask me in relation to
so there are two elements of that standard that are partially conformity.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about why that is?
So the first one, which is conduct of work, evaluation of findings, I think this is an area that we think we need to improve on, and I think we're just being so very self-reflective, because if the findings are right, they need to help to ensure that we have the right management action, which will then help to improve the control environment. But if the findings are not right, then you end up with the wrong action. So we are very deliberate on this, and also there's a new requirement for us to include root cause analysis within our reporting as well. So we just need to make sure that we have a robust methodology and plan to get that right. I'm going to look for the next one. It talks about technical, isn't it? Okay, so technical resources. And I've always said that there are some areas, for example, in IT, we know that we don't have the technical skills that are required in that space, not just IT. There are other emerging areas like cyber, like environment, sustainability. So I recognize that there are areas that we probably fall short, which may require us to be trained or to get support from other colleagues. That's why we've got that contract with KPMG. But I do recognize that I need to do something for us probably to be in a stable position. I also recognize that relying on KPMG is not a long-term solution. We need to do something to make sure that we have a sustainable approach to managing that challenge.
Ask you a question, please, Chair, just quickly. Item 7, I think, on page, it's your table of the performance indicators, the performance targets, page 226. So you have down there your performance targets in terms of effectiveness, efficiency improvement, value addition. You with me? In the strategy document, sorry, and in the strategy again now. Like myself. And this is a 3-year strategy. And a great opportunity, I think, actually. I'm familiar with this from other places, for us, of course yourselves, but also us as an audit committee to take that strategic approach, take that longer term view of everything. These targets then, Simba, when you say, again, thinking about milestones across those 3 years, are they breakdownable like across the 3 years, would you say, or are you expecting to, are you hitting them, some of them now even?
Yes, so I would expect that we hit most of these annually, but the key thing here, I think, is the way we work with the business to get some of these things done. Because if we need, it doesn't help to do an audit, then it takes us 3 months to finalize. it will be stale or things change. So the key issue is just making sure that we engage with management, but also for us to have to utilize in some ways things like analytics or some form of automation for us to be able to complete some of these audits as efficiently as we can. And I think there's an opportunity with that as well. So I can see that within the next year, that's what should be aiming to get to. And I think we are doing okay in some of the parts, but this is highly aspirational. These are high targets, but I think that's where we need to get to. Otherwise, it will render the service, I think. I would want to give the opinion as quickly as we can, so that people can do something about it rather than being so retrospective and then you go and say things are wrong but they can't change. You really need to do this as quickly as you can to give local the chance to improve and make impact.
Thanks. That's a great report.
So there are 3 documents to approve: the internal audit quality assurance and improvement programme, the internal audit charter, and the internal audit strategy. I'm happy to approve these reports.
Chair, just can I say something, Chair? Just to thank my colleagues, Alison, Louise, and Phil, for the work that they do. I wanted to make this, it's just been a tough, there are too many reports here, and it takes a lot of time to get the work done as well producing the report. So, colleagues, thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And thank you very much to everyone. And another very full and busy agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you.